So what's up guys, we are back with another fanfiction which is on, what if Harry Potter saved Bella instead of Edward? Before that don't forget to hit the subscribe channel for more such fanfictions. Harry Potter, also known as the Master of Death, and many other names sat quietly on a floating chunk of rock at the center of some unknown galaxy, deep in some unknown universe, watching a supermassive black hole feast on whatever had gotten caught up in its gravitational pull. Many would ask what such a powerful being was doing. Was he figuring out the enigma of life? Was he pondering the mysteries of the universe? No, he was eating a banana. Harry tossed the peel towards the black hole and stood up and stretched. He enjoyed the quietness and solitude of space. To him it was very relaxing and a great way to get away from it all. Out here he could shut off the constant stream of voices and information that regularly flood a god's mind. Deciding that he'd had enough alone time, he opened up his connection to the universe once more. The cacophony filled him like always. It didn't matter much to him since he could easily handle it. It was a truly strange feeling to be able to touch the minds of every living soul in every existing universe. One mind in this particular universe caught his attention. A teenage girl with a kind heart and a gentle soul was suffering heartbreak. Hers was an especially bad case, and being the curious sort, he wanted to know why. Harry was a very curious person. That tended to happen when you had practically unlimited power and time. You had to find ways to fill that time. Harry usually liked helping people when he could. Most gods didn't really get involved in the lives of mortals, but Harry was always a strange creature who liked to walk his own path. Locking down her location, he disappeared then reappeared close by. He looked around. The place was cold and wet and very green. Forks, Washington State, Earth Vir. 544,842,632,821. 523.669. He thought. He was a long way from home. Most universes had a version of Earth. This one didn't seem particularly special. The town that he found himself in was small, containing a few thousand people at best. Harry was standing outside of a medium-sized, white, two-story house that he knew contained the girl in question. Fading from mortal senses, he materialized next to her. She was alone in the house and curled up on her bed crying. He tilted his head as he got a good look at her. She was a pretty little thing, though not overly so. She had pale skin and long, thick, brown hair. She was thin with an average figure. He couldn't see her eyes since they were shut tight. Harry allowed himself to be seen and said, "Hello, immortals." Bella Swan was currently curled up in a little ball on her bed crying her eyes out. She knew it was pathetic, but she didn't care. Edward had left her. He said that he didn't care about her. She felt like there was a hole in her chest. A hole that hurt so bad that she could barely breathe. She gave a loud snort while sucking in some much-needed oxygen when a voice suddenly rang out. "Hello," said the mysterious voice. Bella yelped from being startled and scooted as far away from the voice as she could. Unfortunately, she was a clumsy girl and fell off the bed with a loud thump. "Are you okay?" the voice asked, laced with concern. The second time that she heard it, she noticed the quality of the voice. It was soft and easy, like velvet against her skin. It was a very sweet sound, she decided. That, of course, didn't stop the terror of having a strange man invade her room. "Who are you?" she asked frantically as she eased herself into a corner. Harry saw the frightened look on her face and smiled kindly. "Don't worry. I'm not here to harm you. My name is Harry Potter. What are you doing here?" she asked, trembling from head to toe. As she got a good look at him, she gulped loudly. Not out of fear, but of astonishment. The person in front of her had to be the most beautiful boy she had ever seen. It was almost too hard to look directly at him. He was thin but still muscular. Tall too. Maybe 6.5 feet. His skin was absolutely flawless. Even more so than a vampire's. Every feature on his face was utter perfection. His large eyes were the most beautiful shade of green she had ever seen, like two priceless emeralds reflecting sunlight, and his hair was thick and perfectly messy, darker than the night sky, and shinier than a crow's wing. She looked at his mouth and saw perfect, white teeth partly hidden behind plump, pink lips. She couldn't help but blush furiously. Stupid teenage hormones, she thought. She was about to be murdered and she was spending her last seconds of life mentally undressing her soon-to-be killer. Harry, of course, heard everything that she was thinking and fought off a chuckle. "I'm here because I heard and felt how sad you are. It was quite jarring. I came here to see if I could help. Or at least cheer you up a bit," he stated kindly. "How could you hear me? I was alone in the house," she asked as she pulled herself off the floor but still stayed as far away from him as she could. "He could hear me all the way in here. Wait, maybe he was," she thought. "Are you a vampire?" Bella almost yelled out, finishing her thought. Harry chuckled. He already knew that there were vampires on this Earth. Not surprising since there were vampires on his original Earth as well. "No, Bella, I'm not a vampire. I'm something much, much more." Harry sat down on her bed and patted the spot next to him. "I'll stand, thank you," Bella exclaimed nervously. "Suit yourself," Harry said, making himself comfortable. "Sitting on rocks in space wasn't good for the back. You're unnaturally beautiful, and you said that you could hear me from outside. So if you're not a vampire, then what exactly are you?" she asked, a little braver than she felt. She wanted answers. "I'm one of the gods," he stated plainly and happily. "One of the gods?" she asked sarcastically, then snorted. "Well, Mr. Almighty, what are you one of the gods of?" "I'm one of the gods of the universal aspects," Harry declared firmly. Bella couldn't believe this guy. "And what are the universal aspects?" "Life, death, destiny, desire, despair, and fate." "And which one are you?" she asked, putting her hands on her hips. "I'm the god of death," Harry said proudly. "The god of death? Yep. So you go around killing people?" Bella asked, raising her eyebrow. "Nah, I just help them with the transition from life to death. I usher souls from one place to the next. It's fate and destiny that usually control how and when someone dies. I have killed my fair share of living beings though. But don't worry, they were all bad, so it's no biggie." Bella snorted again. "Well, that was certainly eye-opening. Could you do me a favor and leave, please? My dad is a police officer and will probably shoot you if he finds you here." "If that's what you want, then sure," Harry smiled and popped up to his feet. "I'll probably be here for at least a short while, so if you want to see me or talk, just call out for me and I'll appear by your side." Quote. Before Bella could say anything else, a scythe appeared in his hands and with a mighty swipe, he cut the air leaving a jagged split. He then proceeded to reach out with both hands and spread the fabric of space-time apart. Bella could only stand there and gape at the blackness of the void beyond the tier. When all was said and done, Harry stepped through a the fissure sealed, leaving her alone in her room once again. She only stood there a few seconds before darkness filled her vision, and she fainted. Immortals. Harry laughed to himself as he appeared outside of Bella's home. Out of all the people he'd ever told about him being a god, not a single one had ever believed him at first. He always had to do some little trick to get them to believe him. The trick with space-time was one of his favorites. Shrugging his shoulders, he went in search of some food. He eventually came upon a small diner called the Lodge. It certainly wasn't fancy, but the food smelled good. Sitting at an empty table, he waited until a middle-aged waitress came over and asked for his order. He gave his order with a steamy smile and watched amused as the poor woman turned. Ed read and stuttered before scampering off to the kitchen. He sat in the diner for a while eating his steak and potatoes, trying to decide what to do next. He was absolutely certain Bella would call for him. They always did. It was just a matter of when. In the meantime, he needed something to do. Harry never enjoyed being idle. Later that night, Bella was sitting on the couch staring off into space. Her father, Charlie Swan, was sitting in a chair watching a basketball game, keeping one eye on his daughter and the other on the TV. Bella couldn't believe what had happened to her earlier in the day. Was what he told her true? She didn't know. How could it not be with what she saw him do? She was still thinking about the matter when she heard the sports broadcaster call out for one lucky fan to take a half-court shot for $10,000 cash. She took a peek at the TV and nearly choked on her own saliva. Harry was standing on the basketball court. She saw him grab the ball and heave it down court and hit nothing but net. The crowd went wild and Harry threw his hands up in triumph. She could see Charlie on the edge of his seat sporting a smile. Harry then brought both his arms down, forcefully and repeatedly while thrusting his hips. He then started doing the moonwalk and ended it with a spin before breaking down into the splits before popping up back to his feet. He was being escorted off the court just as he started blowing kisses to the cheering crowd. Bella slapped her hand over her face in embarrassment as Charlie chuckled good-naturedly. Dad, where is the game being played at?" she asked her father. "At Madison Square Garden in New York," he answered before getting up to get himself another beer. Somehow Harry had traveled all the way to New York in only a few hours. Shaking her head, Bella decided she needed some rest to forget about the sudden craziness that barged into her life. Life for Bella, she thought, was miserable. She missed Edward, she barely ate and slept. And when she did finally get to sleep, she was plagued by nightmares. She would go to school and then to work at Newton's Olympic Outfitters, then come home and sit in her room and stare out the window. She could hear the whispers at school. They would say that she was starting to look and act like a zombie from some horror film. She really couldn't contest the insults. Not that she would try anyway. At that point in time, she really didn't care about anything, let alone what people were saying about her. Her thoughts would occasionally stray to the young man that appeared in her room. Harry Potter was what he called himself. He hadn't returned since she asked him to leave. She didn't know if she considered that good or bad. She got up from her bed and went into the living room. Charlie was doing a double shift at the police station that night, so he wouldn't be coming home until very late. Bella flopped down on the couch and grabbed the TV remote. Turning the TV on, she Ted flicking through the channels trying to find something to watch. She came across the Academy Awards show that was nearing its end. The beautiful, blonde starlet who was holding the envelope announced, "And the Oscar for Best Male Actor goes to," then opened the envelope. "Harry Potter in The God and Me." Bella's eyes widened comically. The camera swooped in on Harry in a fancy tuxedo who was happily wiping away fake tears and stood up to shake Robert De Niro's hand. Then he tongue-kissed Julia Roberts. Once on stage, he said, "I'd like to thank God first and foremost. I'd also like to thank my family." Bella quickly switched the channel. It was one of those crime shows. The lead detective pulled back the sheet covering a corpse and it was Harry with a gunshot wound on his forehead. "This is the third juror murdered this week," the lead detective said in a grave voice. His pretty female partner was clearly looking at a certain portion of Harry's body that couldn't be shown on network TV. "What are you staring at?" he asked her in annoyance. "Did he suffer trauma to his genitals? Looks severely swollen," she asked. No, it doesn't say anything about that on the autopsy report," he said awkwardly. She smirked. "That's what I call a hung jury." Bella quickly switched the channel again, red-faced. A horse race. Everybody was riding normally, except Harry, who flew by on a chariot, wielding a spear. An old, grainy kung fu film. Harry had long white hair with a long white mustache and a pointy beard. "You dishonored my family, Rai. Now you must die," he exclaimed, he movement of his mouth not matching the words he spoke. Harry winning a pool game in only one shot. Harry tap dancing with Shirley Temple. Harry on the TV show Cops Running from the Police. Harry playing ping pong with Forrest Gump. Harry pulling up crab pots on Deadliest Catch. Harry on the talk show Maury. When it comes to 6-month-old baby Shaquanda, Harry, you are not the father. The Crow. W.D. Ode and the very heavy-set black girl who Bella assumed was the mother, collapsed on stage wailing in grief. Harry jumped up and punched the air. What? I told you. I ain't yo baby daddy. You a hoe." When he started high-fiving the men in the crowd, Bella had had enough. "That's it. Harry Potter. You better get over here right now," Bella yelled out with her hands on her hips and a vein bulging in her forehead. Harry appeared right in front of her with a big smile on his face. "What can I do for you, Bella? Will you please stop being on every show that I try to watch?" Bella asked, exasperated. "That's asking a lot, but I think I can manage," said Harry with the goofy, boyish smile he always seemed to be wearing. She couldn't help but smile back even though she desperately tried to fight it. "Were you doing the TV thing just to mess with me?" she asked with an eyebrow raised. "Maybe," Harry replied noncommittally. Bella huffed. "Well, you weren't paying any attention to me, and I was getting lonely." Harry fake pouted. "You're such a jerk." Bella gave a small laugh. "Will you be completely honest with me?" she asked. Seeing him give her a nod, she asked, "Are you really a god?" "Yes." Bella breathed deeply, then sat back down on the couch. She felt Harry sit next to her. "How old are you?" "I was 116 when I gained godhood. Since then I've lived for hundreds of trillions of Earth years. Needless to say, I'm very old," Harry replied honestly. "By the way, don't ask how I gained godhood. There are things mortals aren't supposed to know. So while I'll be as honest as possible, there are things that I'm simply forbidden from talking about." Bella nodded absently. He could tell she was trying to wrap her head around his age. It still baffled him on occasion. "So what exactly can you do?" she asked timidly. "With my power?" He asked for clarification. Seeing her nod, he continued. "Anything I want. There are things I could do but am not allowed to. The gods aren't allowed to encroach on other gods' territories, for example. There are also things I simply refuse to do. Messing with people's minds in a major way or taking away their free will are a couple of things. I won't hurt the innocent if it can be avoided. There are actually quite a few things I refuse to do." Harry shrugged his shoulders. "So you could find someone for me?" Bella asked hopefully. "If you're talking about the blood drinker that you love, then yes, I could. I won't though. He doesn't want to be found by you right now, and as I said, I won't mess with his free will." Bella's lips began to tremble and her eyes started watering. Harry put an arm around her and pulled her close. "Don't worry though. Things have a way of working themselves out," Harry said softly, rubbing her shoulder. Bella sniffled and asked, "They do?" Harry took his hand off her shoulder and ran his fingers through her long, beautiful hair. "Yes, Bella, they do." With that, she burst into uncontrollable tears and hugged him tightly, resting her head on his broad chest. Harry just let her cry while gently scratching her scalp and eventually pulled her onto his lap. The tears continued until finally, he felt her fall asleep. He held her and let her sleep. Using his powers, he made sure to give her happy dreams until he felt her father returning from work. Harry carried Bella up to her room and placed her on her bed. He pulled the covers over her and silently disappeared. Immortals. Bella woke up the next morning feeling much better than usual. She sat up and yawned while rubbing the sleep from her eyes. It took her a moment to remember what had happened. She was sitting with Harry in the living room, and to her embarrassment, she remembered crying all over him. He was kind about it. He let her cry and offered soft, kind words until she fell asleep. He must have carried me to my room, she thought. Bella looked at the clock. She only had an hour before school started. Quickly, she showered and dressed, then drove her noisy, old truck to school. The school day passed slowly for Bella. Like pretty much every other day since Edward left, she kept mostly to herself. She chatted with her friends when talked to, but otherwise kept quiet. She spent most of her time glancing at the clock, waiting for school to end. Once the final bell rang, she quickly packed up her TNGs and made a timely dash towards the parking lot. Thankfully, Bella didn't have work that day. She could hear Jessica, Angela, and Mike right behind her. Thinking about what she wanted to do that day, Bella couldn't decide. She would probably end up doing her homework then sit in her room until it was time for bed. The prospect of that wasn't too appealing. I could call Harry and see what he's doing, she thought. Just as she exited the building into the cold, drizzly Washington weather, she spotted Harry standing there with a smile. Bella stopped cold and had to fight a blush. Harry was standing there in tight, ripped jeans and boots, and a t-shirt tight enough that she could practically count every muscle on his abdomen. "Bella!" he yelled, waving at her. This time she couldn't stop the blush from forming. Not because of Harry, but because she was sure everyone was now looking at her. Bella just stood there as he walked up to her, lifted her into a big hug, and spun her around, causing her to squeak in embarrassment. When he put her down, Harry asked, "I was hoping you'd like to hang out today." Bella. Who is this?" she heard Jessica ask. Bella winced, knowing she would have to introduce Harry, who was likely the most handsome boy in the universe, to her boy-crazy friend. This is Harry," she stated, pink-cheeked. "Harry, this is Jessica, Angela, and Mike," pointing out each of her friends. Harry smiled at Bella's friends. Jessica and Angela were standing there open-mouthed, and Mike looked especially vexed at having to compete with another good-looking guy for dear Bella's affection. "It's nice to meet you all. I hope you don't mind me stealing Bella away." Seeing that they weren't going to answer anytime soon, he grabbed Bella's hand and started to pull her towards her truck. "I'm sure I'll see you all again soon. Bye," he called out. Harry, where are we going?" "To your house. After that, anywhere you want," he said, getting into the driver's seat. Bella hopped in next to him. She was about to give him the key when he snapped his fingers, and the truck started. The drive home was short as she chatted about her day at school. Once safely parked in the driveway, they went inside and Harry plonked down on the couch as she dumped her backpack in her room. Making her way back to the living room, she dropped down next to him. "So where do you want to go?" "I don't really know. I guess we could go to First Beach and walk around," she said, not knowing what else to do. Forks wasn't exactly teeming with fun activities. Rolling his eyes, Harry replied, "Bella, I can take you anywhere you want. I can take you to Hawaii in an instant if you want to go to the beach." Bella sputtered for a few seconds, unable to comprehend what exactly he was saying. Anywhere. Seeing him nod, her mind decided to shut down for a moment. There were so many possibilities. Definitely somewhere warmer than Forks, she thought. How about a beach that's not so crowded? No problem. Grabbing her hand, they disappeared, only to reappear a second later. Bella looked around in wonder. It was warm. Very warm compared to Forks. The sand was powdery in a very light yellow. Almost bordering on white. There were palm trees swaying gently in the cool coastal breeze. She almost had to cover her eyes as the bright sun reflected off the near-transparent blue ocean water. The smell of sea salt wafted over her as the sun beat down on her head. Bella gave a happy sigh. She turned to thank Harry for bringing her there but stopped short as she saw him now wearing only swimming trunks. Shaking the cobwebs from her brain, she realized that she needed to get used to the devastating beauty that he beheld, and most definitely cease with the damn blushing. "Come on, Bells. Let's swim," Harry happily exclaimed. "I don't have a swimsuit," her reply was cut short by the snap of fingers. Looking down at herself, she yelped loudly. Most of her body was on display, and the parts that weren't were covered by a very skimpy, black, two-piece bikini. Harry laughed as she desperately tried to cover up with her hands. "We're on an uninhabited island in the Caribbean. There's no need to be shy. Now let's go." Not bothering to wait for a response, Harry scooped her up bridal style and hauled ass toward the water. Male laughter rang out as he got knee-deep in the water and flung Bella out of his arms. Bella squealed in fright as she suddenly became weightless, only to splash back first in the cool water. Breaching the water's surface, Bella spit out a mouthful of water and coughed a few times, trying to clear her throat. Brushing the soggy hair from her face, she stammered, You. Did you know that when you get mad your body jiggles in all the right places?" he claimed, eyeing her up and down with a smile. Bella abruptly sunk down into the water until only her head could be seen. Harry laughed boisterously. As the hours passed, they spent the rest of the day swimming and splashing amongst the waves. Bella ultimately got used to being half naked and spent some time sunning on a beach chair. Inevitably, they had to return so that she could make dinner for her father. With a great deal of reluctance, she resurfaced in Forks and got to work on dinner. Spaghetti's good, Bella," Charlie remarked, twirling the noodles onto his fork for another mouthful. Charlie had been keeping a close eye on his daughter since that punk Edward had abandoned her. Bella had been in a bad state. The constant nightmares and late-night screaming had him worried. That wasn't even mentioning the self-imposed hunger strike and the deep depression. He was grateful that she seemed a little better that night. At the very least she would smile on occasion, no matter how brief. After dinner, Bella made her way upstairs to work on some homework while Charlie sat in his usual spot in front of the television. Once her school work was completed, she took a shower and got ready for bed. Laying in the darkness, Bella thought about her day. She didn't realize how much she missed the warm sun. Spending the day on a sunny beach certainly made her a bit homesick for Phoenix. Not that she would leave Forks for any significant amount of time, but maybe she could get Harry to take her back for a short visit. Harry, she thought. He had just barged into her life and decided to become a staple in it. She couldn't have stopped him even if she wanted. His powers were unworldly. She still had trouble trying to comprehend the things that she saw him do. At first, she thought he belonged in a mental institution. Since then he certainly proved himself true. Maybe she was the one who belonged in a psych ward. Maybe her mind snapped and Harry was just a figment of her imagination. On the other hand, she never dreamed vampires could actually exist, and yet they did. If vampires were real, then other mythical creatures could exist as well. Harry had said that he was a god, and she believed him. There was no other explanation for someone who could bend reality on a whim. Bella wondered if there was something strange about her. She seemed to attract the attention of things that shouldn't be real. First, her beloved Edward, then James the Hunter, and now Harry. Truth be told, she was grateful that Harry had resolved himself to become a part of her life. He was a nice boy, trillion-year-old man whatever. He was kind, and always had a smile on his face. It was difficult not to smile back when he spoke to you. Harry did a good job of distracting her from the pain and suffering she endured since he left. Bella would certainly welcome any form of positive distractions that she could get. She enjoyed their time at the beach, though she did owe him a slap for the scandalous bikini. She wondered if they would hang out tomorrow. "Harry," she called out in a whisper, trying not to draw the attention of her dad. Just as she expected, he materialized right next to her bed wearing the same clothes that he showed up to her school in. "What can I do for you, Bella?" he asked softly. He knelt down so their faces were only a foot or so apart. "Don't worry about being quiet. Charlie won't hear us. Thanks for taking me to the beach today," Bella replied, her cheeks heating up from being in such close proximity to him. Harry smiled brightly, causing her blush to spread a bit further. "You're welcome. Did you have fun?" Not trusting her voice in such an embarrassed state, she merely nodded. Harry placed a hand on top of her head and used his thumb to gently stroke her hair. Bella's breath hitched, and she closed her eyes, savoring the slight intimacy of what he was doing. "Would you like to see me again tomorrow?" she heard him ask. Still not trusting her voice, she nodded again. "I'll meet you again after school. Now get some rest." Harry didn't leave, and Bella didn't ask him to. She just kept her eyes closed and relished the warmth of his hand and the soft tickle of his thumb brushing against her sensitive skin. Soon after, she drifted off to sleep and welcomed the bliss from a second night of pleasant dreams. Immortals. G's school is annoying, Bella thought. Or more accurately, the kids who went to her school were annoying. Angela was fine. She was her normal sweet self. Jessica on the other hand wouldn't shut up about the yummylicious hunk that was Harry Potter. She had asked at least 100 different questions about him. It got to the point where Bella nearly snapped at her before catching herself and calming down. How many times can a person say, "I wonder if he's a good kisser," before you're allowed to say, "Shut the fuck up, you ratty, old skank"? Mike was being especially irritating as well. He seemed to make it his mission to flirt any time he opened his mouth. Bella knew that he was taking it so far because he felt threatened by Harry. Nearly snorting at the thought, she was close to setting him straight once and for all. Mike shouldn't feel threatened because he'd never have a chance with her. Not because Bella thought she was better than him, but because she would never love someone as much as she loved Edward. It just wouldn't be fair for her to get involved with anyone. The final class of the school day was spent half listening to the boring teacher and the other half answering Jessica's questions about Harry's muscles. Bella would never admit it, but she did take a small amount of vindictive pleasure at the aggravated look on Jessica's face as she described exactly how Harry looked without a hurt on and how hard his muscles felt when she touched them. As soon as the bell rang, Bella was out of her seat heading for the exit. Just as promised, Harry was waiting for her at the exact spot where she had met him the previous day. She couldn't help but smile and run up to him. Catching her in his arms, he gave her his patented twirling hug. "How was your day?" he asked in his sweet, velvety voice. "Boring and troublesome," was her succinct and honest answer. Harry just laughed and placed her back on her feet. Tousling her hair he replied, "That's pretty much the definition of high school." Not wanting to stick around to give Jessica and Lauren a chance to fawn over her new friend, she grabbed his hand and tugged him to her beat-up, old truck. Half an hour later she and Harry were walking the streets of Phoenix, Arizona. She showed him the places she used to hang out at and told him stories of her growing up there. They found themselves sitting outside of her favorite ice cream parlor, each snacking on a bowl of triple scoop chocolate with sprinkles. "Have you ever been married?" She guessed that he would have been at least once or twice in his very long life. Harry nodded, "Several thousand times." Bella nearly choked on her ice cream. Thousands. Wow. That's a lot. Not when you take into account how long I've lived. Do you have any kids? She wondered. Not currently. I've had at least one child with every wife I've had. I always stay with my family until they pass on. I take care of them and give them as much love as possible. It's always hard when we part, but even I can't keep them alive forever. That's something that I'm not allowed to do, he sadly stated. Bella winced. She really didn't mean to bring up such sad memories. Sensing what she was thinking, Harry gave her a soft smile and said, "The pain of losing a loved one can't compare with the joy you receive from living a long, happy life with them. Death is a natural part of life, and the beginning of the next great adventure, or so I've been told. Will you marry again?" she asked, scooping a spoonful of chocolatey goodness into her mouth. "Most likely. I don't know when, but eventually, I am sure I'll meet someone that catches my fancy." What's it like having children? Incredible, scary, and many other words I could use to describe it. There's nothing like it. You wouldn't believe the happiness you feel when their little hand grabs your finger for the first time. Of course, there's also the first time they wreck your car. So what do I know? Harry chuckled. Have you ever had kids with a non-human? Harry had told her about the many different beings that he had met over the years. She really wished that she could have met some of them. Many times. I've even had a child with a vampire. A vampire? Bella gaped. What was she like? Harry thought about the best way to answer. She was incredibly stunning. She wasn't a bad person or particularly mean. Her biggest problem was that she was uncommonly vain. Quote, "Why did you have a baby with her then?" "Because her one wish was to have a biological child, and I felt bad for her," he explained. Something didn't add up for Bella. From what Edward had told her, vampires couldn't have children. When she asked Harry about this, his explanation baffled her. Male and female vampires of this planet cannot have biological children together. It's simply impossible. A male vampire can impregnate a female human, but there would be severe consequences. The only way for a female vampire to get pregnant would be if someone like me decided to have a child with them. The process would be incredibly tricky. I won't go into it in detail, but it would take someone with divine powers to make it happen. Seeing that he wasn't going to explain further, she decided to ask another question that she had talked to Edward about. "Harry, do vampires have a soul?" Edward once told me that he didn't think they did. I can answer that with 100% certainty. Yes, they do. If anyone would know, it would be me, finishing off the last of his ice cream. Every living thing has a soul. Even stink bugs. She hated stink bugs since she was little and one flew in her mouth. Laughing at the look on her face, he said, "Yes, even stink bugs. Remember that the next time you try to eat one." Sputtering in indignation, she tossed her empty bowl in the trash. "We should probably get back. It's starting to get late, and Charlie will be getting off work in an hour or so." Later that night, Bella huffed and looked at the clock. 1 a.m. And she still couldn't fall asleep. She was thinking about her time with Harry again. When he described that vampire who'd had his baby, she immediately thought about Rosalie. Beautiful and vain. That pretty much described her to a T. She wanted to tell Edward what Harry had said about vampires and souls. She knew it would make him very happy to hear that he did indeed possess a soul despite his disbelief. It saddened her greatly knowing that she may never be able to. She rolled on her side and sniffled. As tears started forming in her eyes, she felt the bed shift behind her. Her momentary hope that Edward had returned was dashed as she felt a warm hand stroking her arm. Bella tried to hide her face in her blanket so Harry wouldn't see her cry again. "Want me to stay with you tonight?" she heard him ask tenderly. Not wanting to be alone, she nodded through her sniffles. The covers lifted up, and he crawled in behind her. Snaking his arm around her stomach, he pulled her close. Bella put her hand on the arm holding her and closed her eyes. Eventually, the tears dried, and she calmed enough to drift into slumber. As Bella slept, Harry watched her. He knew that it was a bit creepy, but he couldn't help himself. She looked so peaceful. The stress lines that crossed her pretty face during her waking hours faded as she rested. Her soft and steady breathing was soothing, and the occasional mumble was amusing. Feeling her wiggle against him, he tightened his hold on her. She had done that periodically throughout the night. She would inch away when she got too warm, then wiggle back when too cold. The contented sigh that escaped her lips made him smile. Harry pressed a kiss to the top of her head and inhaled the scent of her strawberry shampoo. Harry rarely slept. Instead, he preferred to dematerialize and spend time without a physical form. The only time he found himself wanting sleep was when he was sharing a bed with a woman. There was nothing like falling asleep in the arms of a pretty girl. He really didn't know what to do about Bella. Should he try to make her forget about the vampire that left her so she could move on with her life? Should he find Edward and slap some sense into him? He knew why he had left her. Harry certainly didn't agree with his decision. It did nothing but cause everyone a lot of misery. He had a feeling that Edward would make his way back to her eventually. Harry decided to wait and see what would happen. If need be, he could always step in. In the meantime, he would try to make Bella as happy as possible. Immortals. Oh, sorry, Harry. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Bella stated triumphantly as Harry picked the "go directly to jail" card from the stack. God damn it. This game hates me, Harry said, as he placed his thimble on the jail square. It's not the game's fault you keep ending up in jail. Maybe you're a career criminal who needs to be locked up, Bella smiled. The sheriff's daughter would say something like that. I still say we should have played strip parcheesi. Bella just laughed at his bad luck. With it being Friday, she was glad that she wouldn't have to go to school the following couple of days. She had lasagna baking in the oven with her dad due home in a couple of hours. Harry had asked her if she wanted to go anywhere special, but she decided that she wanted a lazy day at home. Of course, she asked him to stay and keep her company. Harry always seemed to brighten her day, and she wasn't willing to give that up anytime soon. Bella ended up beating him badly, and RRY made himself scarce once her father pulled up to the house. The next morning Bella woke up after a good night's rest and lifted her head from Harry's chest. Her cheeks reddened as she saw him smiling at her. Good morning. Had a good sleep. She nodded, then laid her head back down. One of his hands was playing with her hair while the other rubbed her back. Your father left about an hour ago. Clearing her mind of the morning fuzz, she replied, yeah. He told me last night that he was going fishing with his friend. He'll be gone most of the day. Did you want to stay home today? I thought you might like to take a little trip with me. Where to? She tiredly asked. I was thinking about heading to England. I was born there after all, Harry said happily. That seemed to wake Bella up. Her head popped up sporting a little smile. Really? I've always wanted to go there. Harry smiled and said, go shower and get ready. I'll cook you breakfast. It's a bit chilly there today, so dress warm. Bella enjoyed the visit greatly. Harry showed her around London and took her to all the tourist spots. He let her see all the different castles around the countryside along with Stonehenge. Harry snorted when she wouldn't let him bring her home before allowing her to try some proper English tea. All in all, they had a fun time. February 2006. Bella was sitting in her room on a Saturday night reading Wuthering Heights for like the 100th time. She was bored and lonely, missing her former vampire boyfriend and her newest friend, Harry. She didn't know where in the world Edward was. And Harry was called to a meeting which he said happened every so often. Sighing, she put down her book and flopped down onto her bed. Bella truly detested being alone. When she didn't have something or someone to keep her mind occupied, it tended to wander to an unhealthy place. For the 2 months that she had known Harry, he did a wonderful job of keeping her mind out of those dark places. He had only been gone since the previous night, and already she missed him terribly. Bella knew that it wasn't healthy to solely depend on someone for happiness, but she couldn't help it. He kept the bad things away from her. The bad thoughts, the horrible nightmares, they all seemed to go away when he was near. Harry could always brighten her day with just one goofy smile that she loved so much. Honey, I'm home. Bella smiled widely at the silky, sweet voice in her room. Harry, she yelled out and jumped off her bed and wrapped him in a hug. Miss me? Harry smiled. Not really, but I'm glad you're here anyway, she answered. Smiling back at him, Harry chuckled and handed her a pizza box. It's from that place in New York that you like so much. Eat up. Bella sat down on her bed and started munching on a slice. How was your meeting? Boring mostly. The after party was pretty good though. Great food, strong drinks, and plenty of strippers. Bella choked on her pizza. Strippers. She coughed. It was a joke. Numbskull, Harry laughed. Eat your food. You're looking a bit thin. I've always been thin, she replied, trying to catch the ice-cold can of Coke that Harry tossed her. Only for it to fall on the floor, causing Harry to laugh at her even more. She blushed red in embarrassment. It wasn't her fault that she was uncoordinated. How did you sleep last night? Harry asked. He already knew the answer. But it was always polite to ask. Bella winced a bit. I slept okay, she lied. You did. That's great. Maybe you should try sleeping alone tonight as well. You know, Abe, you'll get into a rhythm and you won't need me to stay here as often, Harry said with a bit of a smirk. What? No. It's fine. I mean, it doesn't bother me having you here, Bella panicked. Harry smiled and shook his head. Don't worry, Bells. I'll be here for as long as you need me, he promised. Bella sighed a breath of relief as she nodded. Placing her book on the nightstand, she got up and grabbed some clothes. Harry waited while she showered, and she eventually came back to her room wearing a long shirt and short shorts. Her hair was still very damp. She was about to ask when her hair suddenly dried. She smiled and thanked him while she crawled into bed. She held the blanket up so that he could climb in with her. Feeling his body press against hers, she fought the sensation of her cheeks heating up. It's still a bit early. Are you sure that you want to sleep already? Harry asked, his warm breath hitting the back of her neck and making her shudder. Bella nodded. Yeah, I'm pretty tired. She replied. She felt Harry's face press into the back of her head. You smell good, he said, breathing in the scent of her freshly washed hair. Bella turned over so that they were face to face. Thanks, she told him, looking at his handsome face. Suddenly, she was overcome by affection. She knew that she didn't love him, at least not like she loved Edward, but he had still somehow wormed his way into her heart. Temporarily losing her mind, she leaned in and kissed him. Quickly, she regained her common sense and was about to apologize when Harry kissed her back. His lips were so soft and warm that she couldn't help but close her eyes and lean further in. Harry wasn't surprised over the kiss. It was only natural that Bella would look to him for affection eventually. Physical affection was something that Harry was happy to provide. His hand traveled up the back of her shirt and began playing with the soft skin of her bare back. As she gasped, he took Ings a bit further by adding his tongue into the mix. It was only a few seconds before hers was added as well. Bella's heart was pounding as she made out with her powerful friend. When she lived in Phoenix, none of the boys paid her much attention, so she wasn't exactly experienced when it came to anything sexual. Once she finally did get a boyfriend, he was afraid to take things too far. The risk of physically harming her was too great to risk it. Because of that, she was rarely allowed to go beyond mild kissing. Now, her and Harry's tongues were slipping and sliding over one another's as their lips danced together. His fingernails being dragged down the middle of her back had her arching and moaning into his mouth. Suddenly, Harry broke the kiss before moving his lips to her neck. Bella shuddered as she moved her head to give him plenty of room. A loud gasp left her swollen lips as Harry began to suck on her neck while his hand slid around to the front of her body. His fingers gently brushed over her hard nipples as he cupped one of her bare breasts. Not bothering with a bra when she got ready for bed, he had complete access to her body as long as his hand remained underneath her shirt. At that moment, she wasn't planning on removing it. The sensation of his fingers grazing her hard nipples was incredible. She had played with her nipples before, but it had never felt anywhere close to what she was feeling now. When his fingers trapped the tip of her nipple between them, and he began to roll it, Bella clamped her legs shut. She rubbed her thighs together to try and relieve some of the pressure that was building up. Things were quickly getting out of hand. She needed to reel things in a bit. Breaking away from Harry, she looked at him and blushed deeply. Harry. She stuttered as his hand sensually played with her perky breasts. Yes, Bella, he asked, nipping at the tender skin of her neck. Well, Bella couldn't force the words from her mouth. What he was doing to her body felt too good and was a great distraction. Things are moving too fast, and you want to make sure that it doesn't get out of control, he guessed, pinching her nipple. Bella shuddered while nodding her head. How about we stay above the waist until you say otherwise? Harry asked, kissing up her neck and on her cheek before kissing her plump, pink lips. Okay, Bella whispered, melting into his kiss once again. She squeaked into his mouth when he sat up and pulled her onto his lap. Straddling his waist, she raised her arms without thinking when he grabbed the hem of her shirt and lifted it off of her. Realizing what just happened, her first instinct was to cover her chest. That didn't happen, because Harry spun her around and laid her back on the bed. Her naked chest rose and fell rapidly as she watched him look at her bare breasts. She didn't think that her face had ever been so red before. This was the first time showing so much skin to a boy before. Sure, they often went to what she liked to think as their beach, where she scampered about in very tiny bikinis that Harry liked to put her in. Sometimes she even wore very thin spaghetti strap shirts with no bra and tiny shorts to bed where she would snuggle and press her body against his. That was all different though. There was never any actual nudity going on. Now her upper half was completely exposed to him. The real problem was that she was nervous. Harry was too beautiful. He was physical perfection given form. Who was she? She was just Bella, the clumsy girl that was kind of pretty. All of that left her mind when he leaned down and kissed her nipple. You're beautiful, Bella, he told her softly. She turned her face in complete embarrassment. She didn't want him to see her blush. Unfortunately, he placed his fingers on her chin and turned her head toward him where he captured her lips in a passionate kiss. Her embarrassment forgotten, she quickly stuck her tongue in his mouth and tried her best to devour his mouth. After a few moments, he broke the kiss again and kissed down her neck and onto her chest. When his lips surrounded the hard, little bead, Bella gasped and pulled his head closer to her. She had never felt anything like this. Her body bucked and twitched every time that his tongue wiggled against her sensitive, pink nipple. Soon after, he switched to the other one. His hand slid up her smooth belly and cupped the unoccupied breast. She could feel his thumb rubbing circles around her areola and occasionally even brushing over the tip as he massaged it. Bella's panties were absolutely ruined, she thought. They were so wet that she was sure that they were molded to her tingling pussy. As he lightly bit down on her nipple and gently pulled it away from her body, Bella arched her back and cried out. She couldn't help herself anymore. She stuffed her hand down the front of her shorts and furiously rubbed her clit. It only took a few seconds before she was squealing. Gee, as a powerful orgasm rolled over her teenage body. Her body was bucking and spasming out of control as Harry's tongue began vibrating against her nipple. She tried to stuff as much of her breast as she could into his mouth as she came all over her fingers. When finally she began to calm down, she tentatively pulled her hand from the inside of her shorts. Feeling completely mortified from her actions, she tried to hide how wet her fingers were. What she didn't expect was for Harry to take her hand in his and lick the arousal from her fingers. Her breath shuddered as she watched him. You taste as good as you smell, Bells, he told her sexily, leaning in and kissing her. As he sucked on her tongue, she tasted herself for the first time. In fact, that night there were a lot of firsts before. She became too tired and went to sleep topless and draped over his naked chest. Over the following week, Bella had gotten used to being physical with a boy. She was still nervous when it came to nudity. But she had come to grips with the fact that Harry thought that she was attractive. She no longer had to be scared that he wouldn't like what he saw. Hell, he had almost seen everything that she had to offer. She still kept things above the belt for the most part. The reason for this was simple. She still loved Edward and didn't want to give her virginity away to someone that wasn't him. She knew that eventually, she would have to get over it, but for the time being, she still had hope. Sure, they could still do other stuff besides full-on sex with her panties off, but she didn't trust herself to keep things rated R. Harry was too good at what he does, and she was sure that things would quickly turn NC-17. Things were already dicey enough to begin with. It was only a day or so after they started fooling around that she allowed him to strip her down to her panties. She couldn't find it in her heart to regret her decision. Harry made her feel incredible. Ooh, God. Bella gasped. Let out a moan as Harry licked up the inside of her thigh. She looked down between her parted legs and saw the devilish smirk that he had on his face. Blushing deeply, she said, "Oh, wipe that stupid look off of your face. You're not that good," she said, embarrassed by the noises that she tended to make. "Oh really?" he said, raising an eyebrow. She opened her mouth to reply when he reached down and pressed one finger to the slight bulge in her panties. Her panties, being completely wet, stuck to her taut lips like a second skin. He could clearly see her engorged clit underneath them. When the tip of his finger touched her panty-covered clit, Bella saw white. There was a flash of the most intense pleasure that she could possibly imagine. All that she could hear were her own screams of please. As she writhed and spasmed uncontrollably. Her panties couldn't hold back the torrent of girl cum that sprayed from her pulsating pussy. She felt his strong hands holding her body down so that she didn't fall off of her small bed. Unable to even speak properly, she tried to beg him to release her from the mind-numbing orgasm that he was holding her under. All that came out were gargled noises and squeaks as she gripped his hand and tried to close her thighs shut. Finally, the bastard removed his finger from her covered clit and allowed her to fall back onto the bed, breathing harder than she ever had. She was nearing unconsciousness, and her head was swimming as her body still bucked when spikes of phantom pleasure continued to hit her. Harry cleared his throat. "So you were saying," he smirked as she turned her head to look at him. She would give anything to smack that smirk right off of his handsome face. When his hand slid up her belly and his fingers brushed over her nipples, she quickly smacked them away. "I'm still too sensitive," she whined, turning away from him. She felt him brush her hair aside and then press his soft, warm lips against the back of her neck. Bella closed her eyes and let herself drown in the sensation. Immortals. Bella didn't know how she was able to get into such a mess on a consistent basis. Things started off innocently. Harry had to leave for a couple of days to take care of some problems that had come up. What they were and where he went was a complete mystery to her. He said that he couldn't tell her, so she let it go. However, this created a problem for her. She had nothing to do. In her boredom, she set out to find the hidden grove where Edward would sometimes take her. She hoped by finding it, she could hold onto a piece of the man she loved. Normally, this wouldn't really be a smart idea. The woods around Forks were incredibly dense and one could easily get lost in it. She had a trump card that she could play if need be. She could always call out to Harry if she were to get lost. She packed up some food and dressed suitably for her excursion and hopped in her beat-up, old truck. Soon she found herself tripping over logs and getting tangled in bushes. It had been several hours and there was still no sign of the grove. Edward always carried her, so it was difficult to judge just how far that he ran. She was wet and tired and wanted to go home and cry. That was when Laurent had found her. At first, she was excited to see him and hoped that he may be delivering a message from the Cullens. That didn't turn out to be the case. He made it very clear what he was there for. Bella was slowly inching her way backward while he slowly stalked forward, his eyes wild with hunger. "You don't want to do this, Laurent," Bella gasped out with a shaky breath. She could see the venom pooling in his hungry mouth. "Forgive me, Bella. It was not supposed to be this way, but I can't help myself. You smell too delicious. Victoria will not be pleased with me. She very much wanted to play with you before avenging James. At least with me, there will be no pain. I promise, Bella," he said hungrily, and in a blink, he was holding tightly to her body. Bella closed her eyes and hoped that he was telling the truth. She hoped that it would be quick and painless. She shuddered as she felt his cold breath on the warm skin of her neck. Suddenly, what sounded like a crack of lightning went off near her ear, and she was flung to the side. Her ears ringing and her head dazed, she was just able to look up and see Laurent getting to his feet while missing his arm, shoulder, and half of his chest. She couldn't hear what he was saying, but he looked terrified. Another crack and he was hit square in the chest. Bella's eyes widened when his body blew apart and disintegrated into ash and cinders. Feeling sick to her stomach, she vomited on the ground. She was just able to wipe her mouth on her sleeve before she was lifted off the cold, wet ground. And she found herself wrapped in warmth. Her body was shivering from the terror that she felt along with the coldness of the waning day. Suddenly, all of her aches and pains went away, and she could hear again. "I can't leave you alone for a minute, can I?" She heard Harry snort. Bella shook her head from side to side as she hugged him tightly around his neck, not wanting to let go for even a second. Harry chuckled and shook his head in exasperation. He made sure to cover her with his magic so that she would feel safe and stop trembling. With only a thought, he appeared back in her room where he ran her a nice, Hot bath. Immortals. The tiny, pixie-like vampire gasped out loud as she sat in her family's home in Ithaca, New York. Her husband, Jasper, was almost instantly at her side. Grabbing her hand, he knew enough to know that he should wait until she snapped out of her trance before asking questions. Once she came to, she turned to him looking devastated. "What's wrong?" he asked, immediately worried that something had happened to a family member. "Bella," she simply said. "She was attacked by Laurent. I can't see either of their futures now," she told him, obviously looking worried. Jasper didn't really know what to do. The only thing that he could think of was to call his brother. Pulling out his cell phone, he began to call Edward when he was suddenly stopped by Alice. "Wait," she told him. "Before we tell him, maybe we should go and see for ourselves," Alice suggested. Jasper shook his head. "What if she was kidnapped? Edward will be furious if we don't tell him," he argued. After a quick moment, Alice nodded. Jasper made the call. Immortals. It was a lazy Sunday morning that found Bella on the couch watching cartoons. She was still recovering from the previous day's events when Harry brought her in a plate of pancakes and bacon. She thanked him and went back to watching her cartoons when she noticed Harry stare off into the distance. "What is it?" she asked nervously. "Vampires," he said. Seeing how nervous she was, he smiled. "Don't worry. It's the Cullens, or at least some of them," Harry told her. Bella stood up so fast that her plate and food fell to the floor. Harry snapped his fingers and cleaned it up. Bella looked at him, not knowing what to do. Harry patted her on the shoulder. "I'll give you some privacy. They'll be here in a moment." "But what about?" She stopped mid-sentence. "You and me," he finished for her. Bella blushed and nodded. "Remember when I said that things have a way of working themselves out?" Bella nodded. "This is them working themselves out," Harry told her. "You and I were never meant to be, Bella. I was only remaining here until I knew that you would be okay." Harry smiled at her, hugging her so that she wouldn't cry. "So you're going to leave?" she asked in a panic. He could feel her body shaking. "I'll stay for a little while and see the world, but I promise that I'll at least say goodbye before I go." He could feel her nodding her head against his chest. Just then, someone knocked on the door, and Bella found that Harry was gone. She gathered her courage and opened the door. Harry watched from above as the vampires were let into her house. Harry rolled his eyes. Sometimes mortals could be so dramatic. Maybe he was just desensitized because he had shed his humanity so long ago. Either way, he'd miss Bella when the time came for them to part. He would do as he promised and make sure that Bella would be alright. Since he didn't have to be within sight of her to fulfill his promise, he decided to travel and see what this planet had to offer. March 2006. Bella woke up in the cold, hard arms of her boyfriend, Edward Cullen. While she was very thankful that he had come back and told her the real reason why he had left, there was still something missing in her life. Rather, it was someone that was missing. Since the day he had left, Harry hadn't been seen or heard from. On the rare occasions that she was parted from Edward, she had tried to call him to no avail. She knew that he wasn't gone. He promised to say goodbye when he decided to leave this universe. Harry always kept his word. Truth be told, she was being eaten up inside. They had talked about their relationship more than once, and Harry explained that he didn't mind if she was waiting for Edward to come back to her. While she believed him, she still felt guilty. She knew that she shouldn't. Harry was one of the most powerful beings to ever exist, and not only that, but he was the most beautiful boy in the world. He could have any woman that he wanted. It made no sense that she should feel guilty because they had already talked about it multiple times. He explained that his emotions were different from that of a mortal. He rarely felt things like envy or jealousy. Even so, she felt as if she let him down. She tried to hide it from Edward, but she knew that he could tell. She confessed to him about Harry. Harry had given her permission and said that if they ever returned, she could tell them about him. Edward had of course forgiven her. He said that there was nothing to forgive. He was the one to put her in that position. Therefore the guilt belonged to him. In a way, he was right, but she still felt guilty. In reality, she couldn't find it in her heart to be remorseful of her actions. She loved Ari and cherished every second that they were together. If she had her way, he would be there with her. He was her best friend after all. The Cullens were very curious about him. They desperately wanted to meet him. It wasn't often that there was something that a long-lived vampire hadn't seen. I would offer to cook you breakfast, but Esme already volunteered. She'll be expecting us in about an hour, Edward told her in his velvety voice. Bella nodded. It would be the first time in months that she would see the rest of the Cullens. Edward would leave soon and run home to pick up his car. He would then drive back to pick her up to take her to school. First, they would stop by the house and meet up with Esme and Carlisle. Bella eventually got out of bed and went to take a shower. Thankfully, by the time that she was done, Charlie had already left for work. Charlie wasn't the biggest fan of Edward, to say the least. Soon after, Edward came by and picked her up. Bella was nervous as they made their way back to the no longer abandoned Cullen house. Don't worry, Bella. Carlisle and Esme are very eager to see you, Edward reassured her. They were indeed very happy to be back in her life. Once they were reacquainted, she, Edward, Alice, and Jasper headed off to school. The students were very surprised to see the two of them back together. When Edward left, she had to endure the stares and whispers. She somehow had forgotten that it would likely be the same if he were to return. Still, she tried her best to be confident like Harry had taught her. She kept her head held high and didn't hide from the stares. Eventually, they became old news and things were somewhat back to normal. Once school ended, they went straight back to the Cullen house. Charlie was going to Billy's Stry GHT after work so that they could watch some kind of college sports, so she didn't need to worry about cooking him dinner. So, Bella, Alice started up, sitting down next to her. Tell us more about this mystery man. You haven't really given us any details. Well, she said until she was cut off by Edward. You don't need to say anything that you don't want to, he told her softly. Bella smiled. Thanks. I don't mind sharing some stuff though, she reassured him. Turning back to Alice, she continued. He's tall as Emmett. He's good looking as well, she said, thinking about what else she could say. He's very kind and likes to play jokes. What about his powers? Carlisle asked. I think that they're practically limitless, at least according to him. Though, he did say that he had to follow rules about how he used his powers. He's old too. Very, very old. And he's had thousands of wives, Bella told them, trying to remember all the things that he said. It was kind of hard to remember since it was months ago. Remembering something else, she said, he even married a female vampire once. He did. Alice raised an eyebrow. Bella nodded. He said that she really wanted a baby. So he married her and they had a baby together. Almost instantly, Rosalie was nearly on top of her. Of course, Edward freaked out and he made a threatening move toward his sister which freaked Emmett out. Thankfully, things didn't get out of hand and everyone calmed down soon after. A female vampire was able to carry a child. Rosalie asked. If her heart was still beating, it would have been pounding in her chest. That's what he said, Bella replied, leaning away from the ravenous girl. How? She asked eagerly. Bella thought back and tried to remember. Well, I don't think that he said how. He just mentioned it along with something about male vampires and human females being able to make a baby, she told the beautiful blonde. A male vampire and human female? Carlisle asked, very curious from a medical point of view. Bella nodded. He said that it was possible, but it was dangerous and not a good idea, she answered. Can you tell him to come over so that I can speak with him? Rosalie asked, grabbing her arm. She made sure not to squeeze too hard in her worked-up state. I've tried to call him several times. He doesn't answer me, she said, looking at Edward and blushing in embarrassment. Try again, Rosalie ordered. Rosalie, Edward warned her. Rosalie took a second to relax. Closing her eyes and taking a deep breath, even though she didn't need to, she opened them and tried again. Please, try and call him back. I really need to speak with him, Rosalie begged. Bella sighed and nodded. Closing her eyes, she whispered, Harry. Please come here. I need you. She waited a moment and nothing happened. She was about to say so when she heard the rumble of thunder. Getting up, she quickly went outside. The rest of the family was soon at her side. Looking around, she couldn't see anything. Then, all of a sudden there was a rapid succession of flashing lights before what appeared to be a DeLorean materialized and skidded to a halt right in front of them. The whole group looked on in shock at the frozen car that was giving off cold vapors. No one said anything until they all jumped when the car let out a bellow of steam from the back. "Look what he did to my yard," Esme commented, and sure enough, they all saw two long, deep ruts in the damp grass. Emmett and Jasper snickered as the door finally opened. Harry stepped out of the car and snapped his fingers. The car disappeared, as did the damage to the lawn. He smiled at Bella. The sight of him made her stomach do a flip. "You know, I was just settling down with two sexy Sonorit. As in a bottle of tequila when you called." "What's so urgent?" Harry asked. Bella tried hard not to blush. She had forgotten how devastatingly beautiful that he was. Her mind immediately went back to all the naughty things that they used to get up to before she shook those thoughts from her head. "Can I talk to you in private for a minute first?" Bella asked. Seeing him nod, she walked up to him. Harry snapped his fingers and a white bubble appeared around them. "They can't hear us now," Harry said. "Why the bubble?" Bella asked, looking around. "They can read lips," Harry told her. For some reason, she hadn't realized that. But it did make sense. "How come you haven't been answering me?" Bella asked, upset that she hadn't been able to see him. "I won't be here for long, Bells. It's best you don't get attached any more than you already are. It'll only hurt you more in the end," he said kindly, putting an arm around her. Bella smacked into his chest and hugged him tightly. Harry hugged her in return and rubbed her back softly. "Now, do you want to tell me why you called?" Harry asked her. She mumbled something into his chest. "Come again." Bella removed her face from his chest and answered again. "Rosalie wants to talk to you." Harry rolled his eyes. "By all means, let's not keep darling Rosalie waiting." Harry removed the bubble just as Bella let go of him. "Greetings," Harry nodded to the group. He took in the sight of them. They all looked similar to how Bella had described them. They were still a bit stunned before Carlisle cleared his throat and stepped forward. As the leader of the Olympic Coven, it was his duty to speak for the group. He held out his hand and said kindly, "Greetings. Bella has told us about you. We've been eager to meet you. I'm Carlisle Cullen." Harry shook his hand and found it ice cold. The strange temperature didn't bother him. "Harry Potter. Nice to meet you." Carlisle smiled. "This is my wife, Esme. These are our adopted children, Edward, Alice, Jasper, Rosalie, and Emmett. You already know Bella, of course." He introduced his family to him. "Would you like to come inside so that we can talk?" "Sure." Harry nodded politely. He noticed the pretty blonde, Rosalie, eyeing him like a hawk. He followed them inside and sat on the couch. Bella sat on one side while Rosalie sat on the other. Once everyone was situated, Harry led things off. "Obviously, Bella already told you about me." Seeing the nods, he went on. "She mentioned that Rosalie wanted to talk," he said, turning to the blonde. "Yes," Rose replied. "She said that you can out of a way that female vampires can get pregnant. Will you tell me how?" she asked eagerly. Harry just smiled and shook his head. "It's not something that can be easily done. Also, the fact that you're in a happy relationship makes it even more difficult. It's best to just forget about it," Harry told her. He instantly saw that she wasn't going to forget about it. "Can you at least tell me?" she practically begged. Harry nodded. Telling her wouldn't harm anything. "Those like me have the ability to reproduce naturally with non-humans, including vampires. Obviously, you can't get pregnant because you're, strictly speaking, no longer human. To get pregnant, you'd have to become human, even if only temporarily." This excited Rosalie greatly. Becoming human and having a baby. Hell yes. Harry quickly tossed a bucket of cold water on her. "However, before you ask, I'm not allowed to turn you back into a human. It's against the rules to mess with the natural order of things," he told her. Everyone was quiet and listening. "But you just said," Harry cut her off. "When it comes to me and those like me, we're allowed to bend the rules a bit. We have exceptions. Let's use you and me for an example," he said. "If you and I wanted to have a child, I couldn't simply make you human. I would get in trouble. I would have to allow my natural powers to change you." "What's the difference?" Alice asked. "The difference is the exception. Such a change can only happen when the woman in question and I have a deep emotional connection." "Why's that important?" Bella asked him, her leg touching his. "Because the bigwigs don't like us messing around outside of our domains." Changing people is definitely not my domain. But if there's actual love involved, they let it slide. The rule keeps me in check so that I can't abuse it too much. Harry explained. How would they know if there's actual love or not? Jasper chimed in. As an empath, he was curious. Because when two people have a deep connection, their souls kind of connect. I don't mean that they become one, or such nonsense. It's more like they hold hands. That's why people say that they lost a piece of themselves when their loved ones die. It can really feel that way, Harry said, thinking back to all of his loved ones. Anyway, my power comes from my soul. When another soul is touching mine, my power can naturally flow into it. This is what allows a girl to temporarily change at the moment of conception and what keeps me from violating the rules. Harry turned to Rosalie. As I'm sure that you've figured out, this is why I almost always have a child with someone that I'm married to. I have the connection to them. While doing so with a woman that's happily married to another man is possible, it's not easy and would probably cause problems in their relationship. And what about male vampires impregnating female humans? Carlyle asked, on the edge of his seat. Possible, and quite easy. It's just like two humans. Of course, the female could easily be killed during the act. Not only that, but having the baby itself is very dangerous. Unless you had someone like me around, there is a very big possibility that the female would die during childbirth. Harry explained. If a female vampire were to get pregnant, how would it work? Rosalie refused to let it go. Mostly, the same way that it works for a human. At the moment of pregnancy, she would become semi-human. She would still be a vampire, but more compatible with carrying a child. She would eat and sleep, but she would still need blood. She would carry for the normal amount of time, 9 months. When the baby was born, it would still be half vampire, but the human side would be more dominant. Harry turned to Carlyle. FYI, it's the opposite for male vampires. The baby would be more dominated by the vampire gene. The fetus would develop rapidly in around a month. The baby would grow quickly and mature to adulthood in 7 to 8 years, though growth would slow as the years went on. For the female vampire, the baby would grow much slower and reach adulthood in around 15 years. Fascinating, Carlyle said in wonder. How had he not thought about researching this all of these years? Harry looked around. Everyone seemed to be thinking things over. Shaking his head, Harry stood up. You're going? Bella asked, standing up as well. Harry smiled at her. Don't worry. I'll stick around town for a bit. I'm going to the lodge to get some of their chicken fried steak, Harry told her, his mouth already watering just thinking about the gravy-covered goodness. Bella rolled her eyes as he disappeared. Immortals. Harry sighed in happiness once his belly was full. He didn't need to eat but still liked to on occasion. He was about to leave Avenue when he spotted a couple of girls that he hadn't seen in a while. They were staring at him with pink cheeks. Harry smiled at them and stood up. Walking over to them, he sat down next to them in an empty chair. Angela and Jessica, Bella's friends, right? He asked, already knowing that they were. Why yes, Angela stuttered in nervousness. Her big, brown eyes were wide open in shock that he had come over and sat with them. Where's Bella? Jessica asked, nervously twisting her brown hair around her pale finger. She's with Edward. I just came from visiting them, Harry told them. He was TCHED as Angela brought the straw of her drink to her lips. Bella had ruined his chance at the two hot mamacitas. Now, as one door closed, another had opened. Oh, I thought that you and Bella were together, Harry finished. Both girls nodded, interested to hear it from him. We fooled around a bit, but it was nothing serious. In truth, I had my eyes on a couple of other sexy girls in town, he told them. Smiling beautifully at them, he saw the pink spread from their cheeks all the way down their necks. Jessica moved a thin bundle of her hair behind her ear in a way that she must have thought was sexy. It was kind of cute, Harry thought. Anyone we know? The nervous Angela asked, her hands slightly shaking. Her trembling only intensified when she felt his strong hand squeeze her thigh. Looking at Jessica, she could see that her friend was sporting the same shocked and lustful expression. How would you girls like to hang out with me for a while? Harry asked, his hands sliding further up their supple thighs. Both girls looked at each other and flushed red. Immortals. With only a thought, Harry took over a small house that was for sale in town. Of course, he didn't steal it. He transferred money from some rich scumbag politician to his newly formed bank account and used that to pay for it. Within seconds, the house was his and fully restored and decorated. When he decided to leave, he'd donate it to charity or something. His favorite part of the house was the giant, fluffy bed which he was happy to break in. Angela was lying on her side breathing heavily while she watched Jessica's back arch as she screamed out in another orgasm. Harry was thrusting fiercely between her parted legs. While Angela wasn't a virgin, she had never even come close to being in a situation that was so sexually charged. She looked down at her body and blushed. She was completely nude with rock-hard nipples and the upper part of her inner thighs were glistening with wetness. She had come down from her own mind-blowing orgasm. Now, all that she could think about was getting fucked by him again. She got up onto her knees and waddled behind Harry. She kissed his shoulder as she wrapped her arms around his waist. Just feeling his muscles nearly made her come again. Her hands slid down his six-pack and onto his member. One of her hands began lightly brushing his arousal-coated CK while the other dipped down and cupped his swaying balls. Having never done this kind of stuff, at least she knew what boys liked. Girls loved to talk about sex as much as boys. She gently started massaging his sack that was thick and bloated with cum. Peeking around, she saw him using his thumb to rub circles over Jessica's swollen clit while she trembled violently. Suddenly, he lifted Jessica up until she was straddling one of his thighs. She slowly rocked her hips back and forth, smearing her juices all over his leg. Right after, Angela also found herself in a similar situation. She couldn't help herself and, like Jessica, she began grinding her wet, hairless pussy all over his thigh. Harry leaned in and kissed Jessica deeply. It only lasted a minute before he claimed her mouth as well. Angela happily opened her mouth and let his tongue in and even added her own. When he broke the kiss, both girls were breathing heavily. He smiled naughtily. "Now, why don't you girls kiss?" he said with a hand on each of their asses. They looked at each other and blushed fiercely. When he squeezed their naked asses, they slowly leaned in and kissed. Angela's heart was beating wildly as she experienced her first girl-on-girl kiss. She was rightly nervous at first, but as the seconds passed, she found that it wasn't so bad. It was even kind of nice. Jessica was a good kisser. Both suddenly moaned when they each felt a finger press against their virgin back doors. Their warm, wet tongues slipped and slid over the other as Harry's fingers traced the rim of their assholes. Angela could feel the arousal dripping from her pussy and leaking all over Harry's leg. They both leaned in further until their breasts were rubbing. Harry's hands were never idle, going from their asses all the way up their bare backs. They broke the kiss and Harry leaned in as well. Soon, she found herself in a three-way kiss. It seemed that despite giving each girl multiple violent orgasms, Harry wasn't done with them yet. Somehow, he had arranged their naked bodies on the bed. Jessica was on her back while Angela was on top of her, face to face. Their naked tits were mashed together as was the rest of their bodies. Suddenly, Angela saw Jessica make a stupid, lustful look and knew that she had been penetrated. He must have pulled out because right after, she too was stuffed full of his magnificently long cock. Shuddering out a whorish moan, she rested her face against Jessica's flushed cheek as he began thrusting harder and harder. Soft, feminine squeaks left her mouth every time that his cock battered against her G-spot. Her body rocked back and forth with every thrust of his hips, making their nipples rub and further adding to the sexual pleasure that they were feeling. Angela had just let out a moan when her head was pulled down and she was kissed by Jessica. She deepened the kiss as Harry pulled out of her and slid back into her friend. The two girls kissed and moaned until they each came around his fat cock. Angela felt him place a hand on her ass as he spread her cheeks. His thumb pressed into her asshole as he pushed his cock deep within her. As she cried out and came on him, she felt warmth spread throughout her body while she was being filled with his seed. Jessica shuddered when he pulled out of Angela and filled her as well. Once he was done, he repeatedly slapped his wet cock against Angela's upturned ass. She moaned and wiggled against Jessica, who mewed as well. She suddenly jumped when Jessica gasped. "We're late." Jessica scrambled onto her feet. She grabbed the wall to steady her shaky legs. Angela gasped as well. "Shit, we need to be home in 5 minutes. Let's go, Angie." Angela and Jessica rushed to put their clothes back on while Harry stood there happily and watched. Both girls quickly kissed him goodbye before rushing to their car in the driveway. As they pulled out, Angela groaned. "What?" Jessica turned to her. "I can't believe that I cheated on what's his name." She covered her face. "Ben," Jessica reminded her and smiled and teased her. "Shut up. Besides, aren't you with Mike?" Angela reminded her. "We're on again, off again," she simply said. "Weren't you on again?" "I was until Harry invited me to his place, then we were off again." "If Harry ever leaves, we'll be on again," Jessica smiled deviously. They both looked at each other and burst into giggles as they drove home while trying to figure out an excuse to give their parents for being late. In a dark, back alley of Port Angeles, a group of men was drunkenly laughing while harassing a lovely young woman that was passing by. She begged for them to stop, but that only made them laugh harder. When she felt that there was no one man enough to help her, she heard the sound of hope emanate from the darkness beyond. Such contempt, such villainy. How can anyone hope to find peace when the inmates are running the asylum? One of the scumbags pulled out a handgun and grabbed the woman, holding the gun to her head. He looked nervously back and forth, hoping to spot the one talking. "Just walk away, guy." Another one yelled out, pulling out a switchblade. "How can there be justice when good men stand by and do nothing?" They heard the sweet voice of their harasser. "Where is that voice coming from?" Another one yelled out, frightened, looking around the darkened alley in a panic. "It is everywhere and it is nowhere. Show yourself." Suddenly, as if the shadows themselves took form, her savior stepped into the light. What they saw was an out-of-shape, white man with a black trenchcoat, a neckbeard, a gray fedora, and a katana at his side. Bah-ah-ha-ha. They all laughed, slapping their knees and hugging each other while trying to keep from falling down. When they had finally gotten a good laugh, the leader pushed the woman to the side, and she fell to the cold, hard ground. Pointing his gun directly at him, he said menacingly, "You should have stayed at home, hero." Any last words? They saw only the slightest of nods. "To those who are about to die, I tip my fedora to you." They burst out laughing again, including the leader. "Just finish him, Johnny," one said, slapping his friend on the shoulder. Johnny squeezed the trigger. As gunfire echoed throughout the alley, they saw only the flash of bullets meeting metal. The katana spun through the air with such speed and grace that they were sure it was cutting through space and time itself. Clangs rang off the brick walls and sparks shot in every direction as the fedora-wearing vigilante sliced every bullet to pieces. "What the," was the last thing that they heard Johnny say as a katana blade exploded through his back, coated in blood. As Johnny fell to his knees, his killer was revealed, fire blazing in his eyes as he pulled his katana from his chest. "You son of a," the man with the knife yelled as he charged forward, intent on avenging his fallen brethren. As he swung his knife, the vigilant countered with an uppercut with the blade, removing his knife-wielding hand before swinging low and removing his leg at the knee. As blood sprayed out, he fell to the ground and slid down the alley floor. He screamed in agony while his severed hand landed only feet away. While his friends watched in horror, one was roundhouse kicked in the chest, sending him flying to the ground. Before another could react, their attacker was moving. He ran and jumped off the alley wall and kicked him in the face, sending him crashing into a pile of garbage bags. The last one looked on and screamed as he ran off in fright. "Milady, you are safe now," she heard him say. Looking up, she could see the moonlight glinting off of his greasy, unwashed hair. She had never been so turned on in her life. As he helped her up, she caught movement out of the corner of her eye. "Watch out," she yelled in terror, just as one of the downed men had gotten up and pulled out a gun and fired. Before she could even yell, her savior was in front of her. She jerked as a loud clang rang through her ears. When her head cleared, he was holding his blade in the sexiest way possible. She watched as the armed gunman looked down just as his shirt began to turn red, and he fell to the floor. The bullet had ricocheted off of the sword and had struck the gunman, she realized. Unable to control herself, she threw her arms around his neck and kissed him harder than he had ever been kissed. Was that really necessary? Edward huffed as Emmett was holding his stomach laughing. In place of the fedora man was Harry, smiling happily. The girl and the attackers were all gone. "I said that we could just take the next alley," he said, annoyed. He had read their minds and knew that they weren't good men. He didn't want to bring Bella near them. Bloog. Bella threw up against the wall. Now see what you've done. Harry chuckled and tossed him a bottle of Pepto-Bismol. She'll be fine in a minute. Did you really kill those men? Bella asked as she gagged from the gruesome display. They're fine. They'll wake up tomorrow alive and healthy and think that it was all a horrible nightmare. Hopefully, they'll learn a lesson from the experience. Harry told her. Was the girl even real? Emmett asked, his arm around Rosalie's waist. No. I just wanted to see how those men would act. Not very nice, if I'm being honest. They're lucky that I'm in a forgiving mood tonight, Harry told them. Would you please act right? Bella pleaded, walking up to his side. I asked you to come to the movies with us so that they could get to know you. Bella, that is the real me. That's how I always act. You know that. Harry rolled his eyes. I know, but could you at least hold off on your murderous tendencies please, she said, and when he saw her big brown eyes, he couldn't resist. Fine, he huffed. No more murders tonight, Harry agreed. Now drink that Pepto. Bella shook her head. I don't like how it tastes. Harry shook his head and snapped his fingers. Bella immediately held her belly and looked happier. Thanks. I feel better now. Harry handed her a bottle of mouthwash. To get rid of the vomit taste, Harry told her. As she gargled, Emmett chimed in. Will we ever see the sword guy again? He asked eagerly. Let me tell you. The Fedora Samurai Simp is the hero that this world needs but doesn't deserve, Harry told them. Staring out into the night sky and earning a snort from several immortals. After they had finished the movie, they went out to eat. Even though Bella was the only one that actually needed food, Harry still ate with her so that she wouldn't feel weird about being the only one eating. Once they finished, they went back to Forks to call it a night. It was getting late and Charlie would surely want her home soon. As Edward drove her home, Harry was hanging out inside of the Cullen house, sipping on his cherry icy. Rosalie eyed the red, frozen drink. I've always wondered what those tasted like. Unfortunately, all human food smells like dirt to me, she said. Harry placed it on the table and slid it to her. Try it out, he told her. She shook her head. It'll just taste bad. I've tried human food before, Rosalie replied. Harry rolled his eyes. Just try, he repeated. She looked at him warily and lifted up the paper cup. Wrapping her plump lips around the plastic straw, she sucked in slightly and drank down the smallest amount. Instantly, her eyes widened, and she looked at the cup in wonder. That tastes incredible. How is it possible? She asked, sucking down some more. I'm tricking your mind to know how it really tastes. Don't worry, I'm vanishing it before it goes into your belly, Harry explained. That's amazing, she said happily. Hey, she complained as Emmett took the cup from her. He quickly drank some down before spitting it out and gagging. That tastes like crap, he exclaimed. Harry just smiled. Rosalie looked between them and laughed hard. Harry chuckled. Go ahead and taste it again. I'll be good, he promised. With a little more caution, he drank some down and found that he too liked it greatly. As they drank their treats, Harry asked, so where are the others? Jasper, Alice, and your parents. Alice and Jasper went out hunting tonight, then they decided to spend some alone time after. They'll be back in the morning. Carlisle and Esme went out on a boat trip. They'll be back in the morning as well, Rosalie explained. Harry smiled to himself. That technically was true, but still dishonest. Rosalie actually wanted to talk to him without the others present and asked them to make themselves scarce. So is there anything that you two would like to talk about? He suddenly asked, making Rosalie freeze. She sighed. You already know, she asked, setting down her icy. Of course, Harry replied. We wanted to talk about the pregnancy thing, the beautiful blonde confessed. Emmett and I have been talking almost non-stop about it. He knows how much it would mean to me, but it would cause problems. Mainly because it would mean another man being physical with you, Harry finished. Understandable. Yeah, Emmett joined in. Just the thought of another guy touching her, he drifted off. Rosalie touched his forearm in a loving way. Harry nodded. First of all, even if you both agreed, I'm not sure that I would. When you consider how long that I've actually existed, having children is extremely rare for me. It doesn't happen often, he told them. Also, even though it may not make a difference, I'm not technically a man. I shed my humanity a long time ago. I'm neither man nor woman. I exist as energy, as soul. When I take a human form, he indicated to what he was now, it naturally comes out as male because that's what I was originally born as. It's what I see myself as. That's not the only concern. There's the time that I would have to be away from him, Rosalie added. And no offense, but what if you decided that you suddenly loved her and wanted her for yourself? Emmett asked. As for the time, I wouldn't worry about that. While affecting the flow of time on a large scale is a bad idea. I could put a sort of time bubble around the house so that time moves much faster within. Several months could pass on the inside while only days pass on the outside, Harry explained. This had Rose's eyes widening. Harry turned to Emmett. My emotions are much more muted than a human's. While I can feel things like love and anger, they don't control my actions. I don't really feel things like jealousy or envy. There's no chance that I would try to keep her for myself. There would be no need for that. And you wouldn't be open to helping me? Rosalie asked, looking at him with sad eyes. Harry almost turned away. His one weakness was seeing sadness in a pair of big, beautiful eyes. One of his past wives had figured that out and would use it to convince him to do damn near anything. Harry sighed. The things he did for a beautiful face. Perhaps he was the true simp. Fine. If you decide to go that route, I'll help you, Harry told them while standing up. Now, if you'll excuse me. He excused himself before disappearing. He reappeared above their large house and took a lazy flight around the area. He inhaled deeply, enjoying the scent of rain and pine needles. He flew arrow, taking in the view of the mountains in the distance before hearing a loud howl. Flying toward the noise, he saw a large, gray wolf running through the forest. Harry already knew about the pack of shapeshifters that lived nearby. He had even spied on them a bit. This particular wolf was smaller than the others, but faster. Judging from her thought patterns, she was a female. That was a bit surprising. All of the others were male. Deciding to have a bit of fun, he dropped down. Immortals. Leah Clearwater was not having a good time. Only recently, she had phased for the first time and scared her father so much that he had a heart attack and died. If that wasn't bad enough, her younger brother phased right after her. To add icing to the cake, she was now the only female wolf and had to share a brain with her former lover who had imprinted and left her for her cousin, Emily. It was worse than those old, cheesy soap operas that her mother loved to watch. Suddenly, out of nowhere, something began rising from a cold mountain stream. Looking closer, she saw that it was a man. It was the most handsome man that she had ever seen. As he rose from the water, she could see him dripping from every muscle on his body. He was only wearing a tight pair of swim shorts as he used both hands to brush the wet hair from his face, and he tilted his head back and closed his eyes. She didn't know what had come over her. But she could swear that he was illuminated in a way that showed every inch of his glorious body. And was it her, or was the song Unchained melody subtly playing in the background? As she heard the words, "Oh, my love, my darling," her tongue was hanging out of her mouth as she panted heavily. Suddenly, he was gone. She looked from side to side when a hand slapped her wolfy rump. She yelped and thought, "What the hell?" Turning around, she saw the man completely dressed and smiling. "If you want a taste of this doggy treat, then you better catch me first," he teased and took off running into the forest. He was faster than she thought possible. Shaking her head, she growled. She'd teach him a lesson for spanking her wolf ass. As fast as possible, Leah tore after him into the dead of night. Leah Clearwater panted while in her wolf form. While she was the smallest of the pack, she was also the fastest. Her speed really showed as she tore through the forest chasing her prey. The good-looking guy was keeping 2 steps ahead of her the entire time. Sometimes he would let her get close, only to turn his head and smirk before picking up speed again. Just ahead, she saw him take a flying leap over a river canyon that cut between 2 rocky hills. Following his footsteps, she too jumped as she reached the edge. The jump was far, and she was barely able to make it. As she landed, she didn't see or hear him. Trying to calm her ragged breathing, she listened for him. She heard nothing to give away his location. No breaking of twigs, no heavy breathing, nothing. Leah took the time to get her head straight. Who was that guy? She thought to herself. At first, she thought that he might be a vampire, but that wasn't right. He was beautiful like one, even more, beautiful if she were being honest. But he didn't look like a bloodsucker. He didn't have the paleness that the Cullens did, nor did he have the strange colored eyes. There was also his scent. To her, vampires smelled like a mixture of sickly sweet vomit and dead rats. The man that she was chasing smelled incredible. She couldn't describe it. It was like a mixture of every scent that she loved. If she could, she would wrap herself around him and fall asleep while smelling him. That's how good it was to her. Where he had come from, she didn't know. She didn't know where he had disappeared to either. Sniffing around the area, she couldn't even pick up a scent trail from him. That shouldn't be possible. With her senses and his incredible smell, she should be able to track him from miles away. He was nowhere to be found. Calming down, she phased back to her human form. The chilliness of the air didn't bother her naked body thanks to the ever-present fever that burned through her. Both she and the other wolves found it easier to think things through while in human form. There was also the bonus of keeping the rest of those idiots out of her mind. Looking around for any clues, she spotted had appeared to be a freshly broken branch on the ground. She walked up to it and bent down to pick it up. Nice ass. A heavenly-sounding voice rang out through the quiet forest. Eek. Leah cried out in embarrassment, covering her ass with both hands and turning it away from him. Unfortunately, she forgot that she was nude and ended up showing him a lot more than her ass. Hubba, he cried out happily, checking out her sexy figure. Leah's wide eyes landed on the man that she had been chasing. For a moment, she forgot the compromised position that she was in and just feasted on the beauty that he radiated. Her heart rate increased as did her breathing. When he smiled at her, she felt her face flush completely red. Thankfully, around this time she remembered her nakedness and squeaked in embarrassment. Covering herself up. That's a shame, he said. I was enjoying the view. Leah's eyes narrowed. I bet you were, pervert, she replied, shielding herself from his gaze. Me, a pervert, he scoffed. I wasn't the one chasing a half-naked man around the woods. She was about to reply with a snappy comeback but was cut off. But you're right. It isn't right letting you stand there naked while I get to check you out. You should have the same opportunity. Before she could say anything, she was greeted with the finest example of masculinity that she had ever seen. Her eyes happily slid over his body, taking in each and every muscle. When her eyes landed between his legs, she gasped while her legs nearly gave out. Hanging low was the largest cock that she had ever seen. No. Even in the pornos that she and her friends used to watch and giggle at, did she ever see one that big and thick. It was hanging half erect like it was just waiting for her to finish bringing it to life. Without thinking, she traveled the short distance that was keeping them apart. First, her hands softly landed on his sides. She felt the warmth radiating from her perfect skin as her hands climbed higher. As her hands drifted over his pecs, she could feel the rock-hard muscles slightly flexing underneath his delicate skin. Meanwhile, she forgot that she was equally nude and was basically inviting him to touch her as well. Something that he was only too happy to accept. His hands started by resting on her flared hips. Giving them a squeeze, he allowed one hand to drift down and over her thigh while the other climbed up her ribs and onto her soft, perky breast. Leah shivered as his big hand encased her soft breast. Her eyes fluttered as he slowly massaged it while his other hand slipped between her thighs. When his fingers touched her rapidly moistening pussy, she couldn't take it anymore. She needed it right then and there. Almost instantly, she moved her hands down his chest and over his tightly muscled abs. When her prize was finally reached, she took it in both hands. Leah marveled at the way that her fingertips couldn't even touch. Not only that, but there was room for at least another hand on the beast hanging between his muscled legs. She wasted no time and started slowly working his cock to full hardness. When she heard him softly moan, Leah smiled to herself, happy that she could bring a sex god like him any kind of pleasure. Her hands began to move faster, starting at the base of his monstrous meat and sliding all the way up until only the head was poking out. Pleasured moans and squeals escaped her lovely lips as his hand played with her sloppy wet pussy. She suddenly squeaked in surprise when his strong hands grabbed her by the ass and lifted her up. Her legs instinctively parted, and soon, her wet, naked pussy was pressed against his six-pack. What he was doing was quickly answered when his lips started tasting the coppery skin of her chest. biting her lip sexily. She gasped and mewled as his lips peppered her medium-sized breasts. Leah wiggled around trying to stuff her hard nipple into his mouth when he took pity on her. Latching onto the hard nub, he added suction just as his tongue touched the tip. Leah's eyes widened as she threw her head back and screamed. His tongue was vibrating around her nipple as his finger touched her asshole. She didn't know what he did, but it felt as if bolts of pure pleasure started at her asshole and quickly traveled throughout her body. When it finally reached her hard, sensitive clit, she shuddered and started grinding herself on him. Harry smirked into her nipple as she rubbed herself on him. He could feel beads of her arousal dripping down his belly and onto his cock. The girl was wet and ready for more. Lowering her body a bit, the length of his cock rested against her soaked slit as he pushed her back against a tree. Leah was shuddering and grabbing his cock, trying to stuff it into herself. He pulled his hips back enough so that she could place the head inside of her burning hot slit. Once it was in, he didn't bother going slow. He knew that she was more than human and could easily take a good, rough fucking. As he slammed all the way in, another feminine scream left her pretty lips while her eyes widened dramatically. His cock rubbed every single pleasurable spot that she possessed at the same time. When his cock slid across her G-spot, Leah's body began to tremble, and when it rammed into her cervix, Leah's pussy clamped down on him. He groaned into the side of her slend. Her neck as her tight walls enveloped him. She was so incredibly wet that it made it easy to continuously penetrate her despite the insane level of tightness that he was experiencing. The best part was the sheer amount of heat that was radiating from her groin. It felt incredible to pull out, only to push back in and feel the hot wetness coat his cock. Unable to stop himself, he began to piston faster and faster. Leah was hiding her face on his shoulder while trying not to make stupid noises. It was very difficult though. Every time that his cock was batter her sensitive G-spot, her pussy would flutter over his fat member. Her back was being pressed hard into the rough bark of a pine tree while being brutally fucked. If she were a normal human, she'd be in some serious pain. Luckily, she could handle a bit of pain that would soon fade away. Just then, his cock hit her cervix again, and she opened her mouth to yell out an expletive. Harry had other ideas. He claimed her lips and began sucking on her hot tongue while one hand slipped between her cheeks and started toying with her asshole. All the while, his huge cock stretched her poor pussy beyond anything that she had ever felt. She had always thought that Sam was big, but he was nothing compared to this man. Leah shivered and thrashed in his grasp. Her hands gripped his broad shoulders, and she felt the hard muscles hidden beneath his delicious-looking skin. Wanting to taste that lovely skin, she kissed and nipped at his shoulder as her pussy creamed his thick, thrusting cock. A shuddered breath escaped her lips as her hard nipples rubbed against his wide chest. It was too much stimulation coming from too many places at the same time. Her pussy squeezed his cock tightly, and when his finger hit her asshole with the same pleasure-inducing power as before, she damn near blacked out. Screaming at the top of her lungs, her pussy exploded and sent her juices spraying out all over his body. She was thrashing so hard that she was surprised that she didn't go flying out of his grasp. While in the middle of her explosive orgasm, she didn't realize that her yells had been heard. Harry felt more of the wolves coming over to investigate and decided that Leah deserved a bit of privacy. Disappearing from the forest, both reappeared in Harry's house. Leah's mind was completely focused on the pleasure that she was feeling. ND didn't even notice that she was now on a soft, warm bed. Her body was still bucking and spasming as Harry finally let loose. Wrapping her legs around his waist, she trapped him inside of herself as she felt him begin to come. She gasped at the sensation of being filled by him. When he had finished, he pulled out and laid beside her. Breathing heavily, Leah exclaimed, "That was fantastic." Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, drawing Harry's attention to her perky tits. Leaning down, he kissed each nipple, which caused her to moan. While peppering her breasts with kisses, his hand slid down her belly and onto her neatly trimmed bush. As his fingers brushed over her very sensitive clit, Leah arched her back and cried out. "Wait," she squeaked. "Let me rest first," she begged, closing and crossing her legs tightly. Harry captured her nipple between his teeth and gently tugged on it while she ran her fingers through his hair. "While I recover, why don't you tell me who you are, and age?" How in the hell we got here all of a sudden? She asked, trying to pull his attention away from her breasts. Her body shivered when he licked her fevered skin before kissing her lips. When he broke the kiss, he started explaining. No way, said Emmett, disregarding Harry's statement. I bet you I can. In fact, I'll bet you $100 that I can cause Alice to get so mad within 5 minutes that she'll yell at me, said Harry. Smirking at Emmett. You know what? I'll take that bet. Alice hasn't yelled in anger in years, said Emmett, smiling wickedly. Alrighty. The time starts as soon as we're in the same room together. When I start, you follow my lead, said Harry, rubbing his hands together mischievously. You're on. Let's go, said Emmett, and they both left the forest clearing and ran back to the Cullen house. A few seconds later they both walked through the front door and found the entire family in the living room in the middle of various activities. Emmett sat down next to Rose while Harry plopped down on the couch next to Alice. Like I was saying earlier, the whole concept of marriage is ridiculous. I know that I've been married quite a bit, but that just means that I know better than everyone else. Harry started up as Alice's head snapped in his direction. I mean, I'm all for people falling in love and whatnot, but why spend thousands of dollars on an engagement? Ring and wedding when you can just buy her a friendship bracelet and be done with it. A frown appeared on Alice's face. It might be okay for all the suckers out there, but I'm not falling for the so-called man trap again. Alice had a serious frown now. You're saying you'd never consider having a wedding? Asked Emmett, smiling as he wrapped his arm around Rose's shoulder. Well, if the right girl came along I might consider it, said Harry as he placed his hands behind his head and kicked his feet up on the coffee table. Alice smiled a bit at his statement and went back to reading her magazine. Of course it would have to have a cool theme like a Gilligan's Island wedding, stated Harry as a matter of factly. Alice's head swung back in his direction so fast that Emmett nearly lost it. That would definitely be cool, said Emmett, trying not to laugh. I know, right? I was thinking that the bride and groom would dress like Mary Ann and Gilligan. The maid of honor would be Jing. And the best man would be the professor. The skipper would obviously be performing the ceremony. Obviously, stated Emmett. Rose was looking back and forth between the two like they were nuts. Ice had a vein forming in the middle of her forehead. And you can forget about spending thousands. They have some great stuff at the dollar store. Does it really matter that none of it matches? No sir. My decoration budget will be $35 and not a penny more, Harry smiled. Alice's eye was beginning to twitch. What about food? Asked Emmett with a twinkle in his eyes. I'll buy it in bulk from Costco. I'm thinking half a Hot Pocket is good for each guest. Throw in a small bag of Cheetos and you've got yourself the makings of a 2-course meal. Was it just Harry or was that vein in Alice's head starting to throb? What are you thinking for dessert? Asked Emmett in a shaky voice. Twinkies and ding-dongs. Their choice. Individually wrapped of course. It adds a touch of elegance, Harry stated seriously. Esme obviously knew what they were doing. Her smile and sparkling eyes gave it away. Carlyle was just shaking his head. Alice was on the verge of having a fit. Poor Jasp. Had to rub her arm to keep her from lashing out. I assume that we'll at least be toasting you with champagne? Asked Emmett, snickering. Nope. Sprite. It's bubbly and clear just like champagne but at a fraction of the cost. We gotta keep it classy so I'm thinking 20-ounce bottles. And I don't want the classic, best man speech. I'd much rather have a comedy roast. Talk about how I gave bride STDs and how you first met me snorting cocaine out of a hooker's navel and stuff like that, said Harry happily. Alice was pinching the area between her eyes and breathing heavily. Got a good location in mind? Emmett asked, his face twitching a bit. You bet. You know that lovely reservoir 2 towns over? The one right next to the city dump? Emmett asked for clarification. Yep. A few fake plastic trees and plants and it'll make a kick-ass lagoon. I know it's downwind and the smell can be a bit funky, but I was thinking that we could provide free samples of Vicks Vapor Rub that tea. Guests can smear under their nostrils. Problem solved. Oh, and don't worry about seating. I know a guy that has 50 lawn chairs I can borrow. They're a bit rusty but that's nothing a little spray paint can't fix. And the best part is that once the wedding is done, everyone can grab an armful of decorations and walk them over to the landfill. Alice had placed her hands over her ears and was shaking her head from side to side. Unbeknownst to anyone else, he was sending Alice visions of his next wedding. She could see the guests gagging when the wind shifted. "What about the bride's dress? They can be expensive, you know," asked Emmett, biting his lip. "Already taken care of, my friend," said Harry, shaking his head. "Why spend thousands or even hundreds on a dress when that old lady who lives down on 3rd Street can make it for $20. All you gotta do is provide the material. And I mean, sure, she can't see very well so the seams come out crooked, but who cares? You only wear IT once, then it goes right in the dumpster," said Harry, exhaling a relaxing sigh. Alice was twisting her crumpled magazine in her hands. $20 you say? That's a bargain," Emmett said, smiling widely. "Sure is. She does smoke like a freight train and owns way too many cats, but I'm sure a can of Febreze will take care of any lingering odors," said Harry, examining his fingernails. Alice was rubbing her temples. "What about the bride's accessories? You know, like the veil?" asked Emmett, leaning forward a bit. "Well, I was thinking since it's going to be Gilligan's Island themed, we can make one out of an old throw net. You know, the kind you go fishing with. You can buy them used at the bait and tackle shop. You just gotta wash off the fish stink and you're good to go. Then you take a pair of garden shears and a roll of duct tape and whack. Aargh. Harry cried out, clutching his nose. Alice disappeared in a flash, leaving everyone stunned and Emmett laughing loud. "I can't believe she punched you," muttered Jasper. "I was even using my powers to calm her down," he said, shaking his head. He zipped off after her. Harry was blinking away the pain as he touched his tender nose. "She can punch hard for such a tiny person," he stated. "You know she didn't actually yell," Emmett smiled, pointing out the loophole in the bet. Harry rolled his eyes and tossed him a $100 bill. As Emmett gloated, Harry didn't have the heart to tell him that he had stolen the money from his own bank account. "Serves you right," Rosalie smiled. "She has a particular love for weddings and finds themed weddings to be sacrilegious. If she decides to stay mad, then I'll make it up to her," Harry chuckled, shaking his head at the crazy girl. It had just turned May and the students of Forks High were beginning to get restless. They could feel summer getting closer and closer. Harry was still doing his thing. Sometimes he would go off and explore the world for a few days, before coming back to Forks and spending time with Bella and the Cullens. He found them pleasant to be around. Not only that, but the wolf girl, Leah, could barely function unless she was provided orgasms by him at least a few times a week. Everything wasn't perfect though. The Cullens were keeping an eye on a situation that was getting worse and worse over in Seattle. People were disappearing at an ever-increasing rate, leading some to wonder if there was a serial killer on the loose. Harry didn't get involved with that, since they weren't bothering him. The Cullens had their theories, but that was for them to deal with. Harry already knew that it was vampires creating a small army. He'd deal with them if need be, but for the moment he'd let the Cullens decide how to handle it. Even so, he made sure to keep constant tabs on Bella just in case. Leah didn't need it since she could easily take care of herself and had a pack of monstrous wolves to watch her back. Rosalie and Emmett had been trying to get to know him better. It was clear that Rosalie wanted to have a baby, but they were still having a hard time making the final decision. Harry and Emmett had built a decent friendship over the past couple of months. Harry had even found a fun pastime of irritating Alice. She was such a nice and bubbly person that he found it funny to see her lose her marbles. "Harry, can you hear me?" Harry suddenly heard in his mind. Rosalie's sweet voice was easy to recognize. She must have been intentionally trying to talk to him through his mind for him to pick it up so easily. Normally he blocked most of the voices from his head. "I can hear you, Rosalie. What do you need?" he answered back. "Can we talk in private, just the two of us?" Rosalie gasped when suddenly, everyone and everything stopped dead in its tracks. The rest of her family were as stiff as boards, and there wasn't a sound to be heard. Looking through the living room window, she could see tree branches swaying in the wind in the distance. But closer to the house the trees were still. She could even see a moth frozen in place mid-air. She found it extremely eerie. When Harry confessed that he could slow time, or even stop it, she believed it. But somehow, seeing it was a whole nother story. She reached out and poked Emmett. He didn't even blink. "Now, how can I help you?" Harry asked. Rose turned her attention from her frozen family back to him. Emmett and I talked it over many times in fact, and we also discussed it with my family. She took a deep breath. We're ready to have a child. Really? Harry asked, raising an eyebrow. She nodded her blonde head. I did want to ask a question though. The baby will technically be yours and mine, she said. Harry nodded at the statement. Well, how will Emmett fit in? I mean, he wants to be the father. Harry assumed. Rosalie once again nodded. I'll stay out of the way unless I find you to be unfit parents, or the baby is in danger. I have a responsibility to make sure that any child I have grows up happy and healthy. But as long as you both take care of it properly, I'll take a backseat to the child's upbringing, Harry explained. He'd been in this situation before. He'd had children with women that didn't want him around afterward for one reason or another. He usually respected their wishes, but still stayed close to keep an eye on the child and provide anything that he could for it, whether the woman liked it or not. Rosalie let out a sigh of relief. But you'll stick around, correct? She asked. The family enjoyed having him around. His powers alone were a major boon in keeping them all safe. Not to mention that if the Volturi ever found out about her having a baby, they'd investigate for sure. For at least as long as the child lives, he told her. And you'll protect it from the Volturi? She asked. Of course. You don't need to worry about them. Rosalie nodded. I'll discuss this with Emmett and talk to you again soon. No problem, Harry smiled. Before he unfroze them, he moved Emmett's arm and stuck his finger in his nose. Sitting back down, Harry snapped his fingers just as Rose rolled her eyes. Hey, what the? Emmett exclaimed as his family laughed at him. Immortals. So, where's old Special Ed at? Harry asked as he splashed Bella in the face with a handful of warm Caribbean seawater. He's discussing the whole baby thing with the rest of the Cullens, she said as she jumped up to avoid a big wave. Harry watched her breasts bounce as she did so. As always, when he brought her to the familiar stretch of uninhabited beach, he changed her clothes into a bikini. Like always, he chose the most skimpy and scandalous one. Bella didn't mind, since she had been through this dozens of times. Then why aren't you there? I chose not to be. It's Rosalie's decision, and she still doesn't like me much. I figured that she wouldn't want me there, and I don't want to cause trouble. Besides, I already told Edward how I feel about it, Bella said. Oh, and how do you feel? Harry asked, wondering about her mindset. Bella bit her lip in a cute way. A little jealous, but also happy. If you give her a baby, then you'll stay longer, right? Seeing him nod, she smiled and went on. If it means that you'll stay, then I'm all for it. Harry chuckled. How gracious of you. He then appeared before her and wrapped his arms around her waist. Lifting her up, Bella gasped at being in his arms again. On instinct, her soft, smooth legs wrapped around his waist as her arms encircled his neck. I assume that you still plan on becoming one of them. Bella blushed and nodded. I've spoken to Edward about it. Even though he isn't thrilled about the idea, he still agreed. She saw Harry smile naughtily. Then perhaps one day you'll want a baby of your own. I'll be more than happy to put one in your belly, he teased, squeezing her smooth bottom. Bella squeaked in embarrassment before smacking his shoulder. She LLED in fright as Harry tossed her 20 feet into the air and let her crash back into the water. When she broke the water's surface, she moved the wet hair from her eyes and sputtered. She didn't know that her top had come off until Harry Wolf whistled at her. Immortals. So, you both are absolutely sure about this? Harry asked again. They both nodded. If we decide to have another child, then I'll be having it with a Muggle girl to keep things fair. You did say that you'll help us with that, right? You know, to keep the girl safe and healthy. Emmett asked, holding Rosalie's hand. Yes, if that's what you decide. Then I'll keep the girl alive and healthy, along with the baby, of course, he promised. Good. Can you give us a moment? Rosalie asked him. Harry nodded and faded away. RRY avoided listening to their private conversation as they said their temporary goodbyes. For Emmett, it may only be a week or two. For Rosalie, the time away depended on her. When she was ready, Emmett walked off, and she said, okay. Harry, I'm ready. With that, they disappeared. Rosalie was nervous when they appeared in a small but beautiful beach house. She could see that it was incredibly Sunny outside as she set her suitcase down. Walking to the window, she looked outside. Where are we? On an uninhabited island in the Caribbean. I bring Bella here quite often. Though, I did add the beach house just for us. I stole it from a South American drug lord, Harry smirked. Knowing that she was nervous, he walked up behind her. You don't have to worry. Everything will work out just fine, he told her. Placing his hand on her shoulder. She turned her head and smiled. Harry reached out and took her hand. He could feel how cold it was, but the temperature or hardness didn't bother him. Together they went out for a walk along the beach. Harry temporarily removed the sparkle from her skin, which she was happy about. They spent a few hours talking about themselves and their lives. After a while, Rosalie began to calm down. And her nerves settled. How about we go for a swim? Harry suddenly asked. Rosalie suddenly realized something. I didn't bring a swimsuit because someone didn't. Tell me that we were staying on a beach, she said, placing her hands on her wide, sexy hips. Harry just smirked. As he snapped his fingers, Rose suddenly felt the sea breeze on her bare body. Looking down, she could see that her two-piece bikini consisted of 3 tiny triangles and a lot of string. She gasped and covered her body the best that she could, which wasn't easy. Rosalie was spilling out of every side. Harry, this bikini is obscene, she complained. Harry laughed. Don't worry. You'll get used to it. Bella did, he told her. Rosalie raised one of her perfect eyebrows at the statement. Bella wears one of these. Yep, she looks great in it too, he smiled. Rosalie huffed and let her arms fall to the side. Harry's eyes traveled over her gorgeous form. What would Edward have to say about that? She snorted. As it happened during her abandonment, I don't think he'd have much to say. And if he did, I don't think my reply would be too kind. Now let's go, he said, scooping her up in a bridal carry and running into the splashing waves. Rosalie laughed as Harry shot a spitball at a man on the opposite side of the movie theater. Her vampire eyes easily tracked the wet blow. Bee of paper as it sailed through the air of the darkened room before joining the 36 of its brethren on the backside of the man's cowboy hat. Why he was wearing a cowboy hat in a theater in LA she would never know. She could easily tell that Harry was drawing a penis in spitballs on the man's hat. They weren't even paying attention to the movie. Harry handed her the paper and the straw, clearly challenging her to take up the mantle of spitballer extraordinaire. She snatched it from his hands and bit off a healthy portion of the straw's paper wrapper. Chewing it up until it was nice and gooey. She balled up the paper in her mouth and used her tongue to stick it in the back end of the straw. With that done, she took careful aim and fired. Bullseye! Harry yelled out when her shot finished the testicle portion of the artwork. Shish! Erupted from several different places. Rosalie rolled her eyes and handed him back the straw. That's some mighty fine shootin', Tex, he told her, now wearing his own cowboy hat. Take that off. You look ridiculous, she smiled at him, talking in a whisper so as to not further anger the crowd. His hat disappeared, and he placed his arm around her shoulders. Rosalie leaned in and rested her head against him. She felt him bury his face in her hair and kiss the top of her head. She always got a jolt, or perhaps a strange feeling when he did things like that. It wasn't a bad feeling. Far from it, she liked the feeling quite a lot. It was a feeling of being human. When she was with Emmett, she didn't feel that way. It wasn't Emmett's fault. He didn't have the abilities that Harry had. When they were together, all that they could do was vampire things. No sunlight, no human food, no spending the day doing stupid human things. When things like this crossed her mind, she would immediately feel guilty. She felt bad about it, like she was cheating on Emmett, no matter that he agreed with this. When she confessed to Harry about her feelings, he told her that it was normal to feel that way. He said that it would just take more time before she was ready. Right now, her guilt was keeping her from truly opening up to Harry. However, she had a feeling that she was close. Neither she nor Harry could tell when she would be ready, but all she could do was keep going until she was. When she looked up at him, he smiled and leaned down. She closed her eyes and accepted his lips. They started out slow before things started to get heated. Her mouth opened and soon, their tongues were massaging each other while their lips danced. A clearing of the throat broke the magic. Do you mind? An old lady said, clearly not amused by their behavior. If you wanna have a go with me, then you'll have to wait your turn. Don't be greedy, lady. Harry told her. The woman looked scandalized, and Rosalie smacked his chest. Suddenly, everyone in the theater froze. You want to get out of here? He asked her. Rosalie nodded. Yeah, I don't even know what this movie's about. The gorgeous blonde replied. Harry stood up and took her hand when she did the same. Can I show you something cool? He asked. Rosalie smiled. She liked when he asked permission before using his awesome powers. Of course, she said sweetly. Okay. This will feel very weird, so don't freak out, he explained. He held out his hand and a dome of energy surrounded them. Suddenly, everything beyond the dome turned black. It wasn't just black, it was the darkest of colors that she had ever seen. It's the complete absence of light which makes it so dark, he told her, knowing what she was thinking. Just then, there was a loud boom that made her flinch. Her stomach started doing flips, which wasn't very comfortable for her. That's the sensation of missing a step that humans talk about. He explained once again. Now it made perfect sense to her. The sensation wasn't very nice, but she was glad to experience another part of being human since meeting Harry. Beyond the dome, things started flashing and blurring. With her perfect eyesight, she could see that it was landscapes that were changing too fast to keep up. Out of nowhere, another boom made her jump again. This time the landscape was static beyond the dome. When the dome fell, she could tell that it was much hotter than the air-conditioned movie theater, not that it bothered her. There was sand as far as she could see. Look over there, he said, pointing into the distance. Rosalie turned and gasped. There was a giant pyramid in the distance, shining white and capped with a golden tip. Is that the Pyramid of Khufu or the Great Pyramid of Giza, whichever you prefer, Harry said. What year is it? She whispered, too amazed to talk properly. 2614 BC, he answered. The two smaller pyramids haven't been built yet. When she told him about her fascination with ancient Egypt, she never expected him to do something like this. Can we go closer? No, sorry. It's best if we don't interact with the past on a personal level. We could accidentally mess things up. It's better if we look from a safe distance, Harry told her. I'll create a copy of ancient Egypt in false space so you can explore all you want some other time. Suddenly, Rosalie jumped on him and began kissing him harder than she ever had. Her jean-covered legs wrapped around his waist as he held her up by her shapely ass. Suddenly, she was placed on a soft bed that appeared beside them. Don't worry. No one will be able to see us, he moaned against her lips. Harry broke the kiss and he saw hunger in her eyes, but not for blood. She wanted pleasure. And she wanted it now. Harry grabbed her shirt and tore it from her body like it was nothing. That's one thing he loved about female vampires, you don't have to watch your strength around them. Harry placed a hand on her incredibly smooth belly. He felt the coldness of her skin as his hand explored her smoothness. Her temperature didn't bother him, just like his didn't bother her. His lips found her belly button, and her back arched as her hand rested on the back of his head. Rosalie closed her eyes and let out a soft moan as his tongue dipped into her belly button. His skin was so soft and smooth and it felt wonderful against hers. His lips began peppering their way up her belly until they reached her bra. Rosalie obviously didn't need one. No vampire female did, but she wore them anyway to keep her nipples from showing when they occasionally got hard. Her bra went the same way as her shirt. It was torn from her body like it was nothing. His hands slid up her ribs. And he cupped the sides of her breasts and pushed them together. Her large C-cup breasts created a tantalizing sight as they were pressed together and formed a deep, lovely valley of cleavage. She saw him staring at her hard, light pink nipples with fascination. Finally, his head lowered and he began kissing all over her perky tits. Harry's clothes disappeared as he settled himself between her legs. Harry. She let out a whispered gasp when he bit down on her nipple. Emmett could never do any biting since there was a very big risk that he would leave her body scarred due to the vampire venom. That was something that a vain woman like her just wouldn't stand for. She felt his teeth pinch her hard nub before he began tugging on it. Rosalie bit her lip and when his tongue started wiggling against the tip, she let out a loud, deep moan. Harry smirked around her nipple and channeled some of his magic through his tongue. Rosalie's body bucked wildly when she felt what she see. Old only describe as an electrical shock of pleasure strike her nipple and travel down her body until it reached her clit. Already swollen and engorged, it immediately became more sensitive than normal. Just rubbing against her silk panties was enough to drive her crazy. She needed to be free of the rest of her clothes. "Harry, my jeans," she choked out as he feasted on her hard nipples, going fr. On one to the other before switching back. He had just begun sucking on her underboob when he nodded. Giving her tit one last kiss, he sat up and brought her legs with him. The first to go was her shiny, red, strappy high heels. He easily worked the buckles open and placed them aside. He held one of her perfect, bare feet to his lips and kissed all over it. Rose's eyes fluttered as more magic was injected into her body through his lips. Wanting more, she reached down and unbuttoned her jeans. Lifting her bottom up, Harry took the hint and started peeling her skin-tight jeans off of her shapely legs. The scent of her arousal wafted over him as her jeans uncovered her panties. He continued to peel them off of her, revealing inch after inch of pale, flawless skin. His lips did their best to kiss every inch of her bare legs until finally, her jeans slipped off of her dainty feet. Harry tossed them onto the ground as she smiled and spread her legs in front of him. Now only in panties, he could see a wet spot on the silky red material. Her panties were so tight that they looked practically painted on. He could see them riding up between her lips and creating the most perfect vision that he had seen in a very long time. Her pale, plump lips were practically hiding the thin string of her panties as they spilled out. In the light of the desert sun, he made sure to block her skin from sparkling so that he could see her wetness glistening off of the uncovered parts of her pussy. He must have been staring at her wet pussy for too long because he was brought out of his daze by her bare foot rubbing against his naked chest. Rosalie was breathing heavily while she placed her legs together and peeled the panties from her sloppy, wet pussy. He watched as the damp material slid up her perfect legs until they were tossed aside. She was about to spread her legs, but Harry stopped her. He held her legs together and lowered his head. Harry breathed in the heady scent of her aroused pussy while he examined her pussy. Her plump, hairless lips were pressed tight together, and he could see that her clit was pink and swollen. Dragging his tongue from her asshole up to her clit, he made sure to leave a trail of his magic in its wake which had the gorgeous blonde wailing in pleasure. His lips touched her clit with a kiss before moving onto her smooth mound. Her belly was worshipped next. Before his lips attacked her jiggling breasts. Rosalie could feel her pussy tingling badly as her juices dripped down and coated her asshole. Having had enough stalling, she pulled him up her body and kissed him deeply as she wrapped her legs around him. Rubbing her wet pussy against him, she made sure that he knew exactly what she wanted. He gasped into her mouth as he lined up and sank into her with one push. Rosalie broke the kiss and moaned loudly. She buried her face in his neck as he stretched her again. Because of her vampire body, she always went back to the perfect amount of tightness. That meant that she had to be stretched every single time that they had sex. Harry absolutely loved it. Her pussy was so wet that he easily sank into her. Once bottomed out, they began kissing again. He had just started sucking on her tongue when his hips moved. She could tell that he was hitting her with his magic with every thrust. His cock was already abnormally long, and when it hit her G-spot, she felt a flare of pleasure that made her walls clamp onto him. They both let out a shuddered moan as her pussy squeezed him tight. It didn't want to let him go. Faster and faster he moved until all that could be heard was their moans and the wet squelching of her pussy being stuffed. Rolling him over, she straddled his waist and rolled her hips so fast that they were nearly a blur. Her tits were jiggling and shaking so much that he had to reach up and steady them. Rosalie cried out and arched her back as she contracted around him. Harry pulled her down and kissed her as he threaded his fingers through her long, blonde hair. Her pussy milked him until he gave her what she wanted. He gripped her ass and pushed his hips upward. She groaned as a thick string of cum spurted inside of her. He kept thrusting and seeding the deepest parts of her. When his balls were dry, she laid down on top of him, making sure that he stayed inside of her. She spent the rest of the day spying on the ancient people of Egypt and making love in the hot Saharan desert. Rosalie buried her face in the bed and moaned as her lover hit that special place inside of her. She knew that he was using his powers to hit her G-spot with every single thrust, and she absolutely loved it. Harry was the only person that could make her lightheaded. Just then, she squealed as her pussy clamped down on him again. This was the 13th time in the last hour. She shuddered as he ran his hands up her sculpted belly and over her large, dangling breasts. He caressed them and massaged them in his hands as his cock scraped against her wet walls. As her body spasmed and jerked, she listened to the soothing sounds of the ocean just outside. They were back at the beach house on Harry's private island. In what was months to them, she had grown extremely fond of this little island. Here she could act like herself. She could lay on the beach and not have to worry about being seen by humans. With only Harry around, he could lay around nude or go skinny dipping. The pair often swam into the deepest depths of the ocean, looking for shipwrecks or anything that fascinated her. She loved her time here. His arm encircled her as he pushed all of the way in. Rosalie's gorgeous eyes fluttered as she felt him fill her once again. With his face right next to hers, she couldn't resist turning her head and kissing him passionately. Their lips and tongues danced as his warmth spread throughout her body. What happened after that was confusing to the vampire. She didn't feel like herself. She was seeing people that she knew. But they didn't really look like themselves. Everything was strange and wrong. It freaked her out so much that she suddenly sat up, gasping and breathing heavily. Looking around only confused her more. She was in her normal room in the beach house. The room was dark since it was night out. She could see the moon and stars out of the window. Harry was sitting up as well, rubbing his eyes. "What's wrong?" "Something strange happened. I don't know how to describe it," Rosalie told him as the bedsheet slid down her body and exposed her gorgeous, perfect breasts. "Let me check," Harry told her. Rosalie nodded and sat still. Harry looked into her mind and chuckled. "Nothing to worry about. You were having a dream." "A dream?" she asked, confused. The only time that she had been asleep was Hence she asked Harry to make her fall asleep so that she could see how it felt. "It didn't feel anything like that. If my hunch is correct, then there's a little critter growing in here." He smiled and placed his hand on her belly. "Yep, I can feel your skin getting soft. Your body is adapting," he explained. "I'm pregnant?" she asked, shocked. It had been her goal, but to have it become a reality was something else altogether. Harry snapped his fingers and the room lights came on. "Lay back and let me examine you properly," Harry said. Rosalie wordlessly laid back, and Harry removed the sheet from the rest of her body. Her nude form was laid out for him. Harry placed a hand on her belly and concentrated. Rosalie felt tingling in her belly as she held her breath. This was the most important moment of her life. And Harry was taking a long time. It was beginning to make her worry. "Well?" she asked impatiently. "Our baby is definitely in there and only a couple of days old." "Congratulations." Harry laughed as she squealed and jumped on him, hugging him and kissing his cheeks. The kisses on the cheeks turned to kisses on the lips. Then that turned to her straddling his lap. Harry rolled her over and pinned her down. She looked at him so sexily that he needed to take her. Without asking, she opened her legs for him. Rosalie and Emmett would raise the child, but she knew that Harry would always be the father of her child. She loved him dearly, and she happily invited him into her body. When she felt him enter her, she pulled his body against hers. Wrapping her legs around his waist, she trapped him inside of her while she kissed him for all it was worth. Letting out cute, little gasps, shuddered when she got close to coming again. Harry could coax an orgasm from her body like no one else. Nuzzling her cheek with his perfect lips, he teased her. "You're blushing, Rosie." Indeed she was. Her face was turning pink as her body changed. Hearing this made her blush even more, and she came hard on him. Harry rolled over and pulled her on top of him, never leaving her body. His hands gripped her shapely bottom and gave it a squeeze. Rosalie looked at him with loving eyes as she kissed him softly and started rolling her lovely hips. Both of them moaned as she gyrated her hips in a circular pattern. He pulled her lower, and his lips attached to her delicate neck. Rosalie mewed as he sucked and nipped on her soft skin. "You're getting warm, honey," Harry told her. Rosalie could feel it. It felt strange to her at first, but after a while, it began to feel good. It felt right. All of this was too much for her to handle, and when his finger brushed over her puckered hole, Rosalie tilted her head back and cried out as she mashed her hips down. Taking him completely inside of her, her walls fluttered over him and began milking him of his seed. Once again, she felt him release inside of her. It was a feeling that she was used to by now. She loved the feeling and loathed to give it up. He wrapped his arms around her as her body thrashed until finally, her orgasm tapered off. She laid on top of him breathing heavily. Her eyes felt heavy, and she didn't know why. Tea was going on until she woke the following morning, and Harry explained that she had gotten sleepy. Immortals. Rosalie sat on the chair with her legs crossed, shaking in happiness. She of course was nude. She couldn't remember the last time that she wore clothes while at the beach house. Any time that they went out, Harry would put clothes on her, but when they returned, Rosalie was the one to take them off. She felt free with them off. She loved walking along the beach or swimming nude. She loved the warm, tropical breeze brushing against her hard, cold nipples. Most of all, she loved having the father of her child staring at her sexy, voluptuous body. Harry said that they needed to stay there for a few more days. Her body wasn't done changing yet. Already she could fall asleep without him using his magic on her. Her skin was much softer and more pliable. Her body was growing warm, and just an hour ago, her stomach growled. She had never been this excited. "Can I see the baby again?" She looked up hopefully, turning her big, beautiful eyes on him. "Rosalie, it's just a speck. Even with your vision, you can't see much," Harry laughed. He had already shown her what felt like 100 times. "Please," she begged. Harry sighed and waved his hand. A holographic display appeared and showed her microscopic egg. Like he said, you couldn't see much. It was only a tiny dot, but seeing it made her happy. It made it real to her. Harry suddenly walked through the hologram and placed his hands on her bare thighs. Rosalie wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him deeply. They remained there kissing while his hands wandered up her sides and explored her naked chest. Immortals. Esme was sitting on the couch practicing her knitting when Rosalie suddenly appeared standing in the middle of the living room. Squealing in happiness, she got up and hugged her daughter. She must have squeezed a bit hard because Rosalie squeaked and jumped back holding her belly. "Careful," Esme gasped, and squealed along with Rosalie, who jumped around like they were a couple of lunatics. The noise instantly brought everyone down, including her husband, who hugged her tightly. Everyone huddled around her and fawned all over her. Rosalie was blushing pink but was pleased with the attention. At least until Carlisle demanded that she be given a complete medical checkup. Of course, Emmett demanded the same, wanting to make sure that she was completely healthy. She rolled her eyes but agreed. As she was poked and prodded, Rosalie had to hold back a few tears. She had only been separated from Harry for a short while, and she already missed him. She knew that she was being silly but couldn't help it. He told her that he'd stay away for a few days to give her time with her family. She of course said that was silly and that he was always welcome there, but he was adamant. She suspected that he wanted to give her time with Emmett, which was probably a good idea. He was her husband after all, and she did miss him terribly. To her family, she was only gone for a bit over a week. From Rosalie's perspective, she was with Harry for months. When her stomach growled midway through the checkup, everyone froze, which made her blush even harder. Esme chastised herself for not being prepared and having the proper food in the house. "It's okay, Esme." Rosalie smiled. "You had no way of knowing," she told her mother figure. Esme waved it off and promised to go shopping as soon as the checkup was done. There was no way that she was missing this. Everyone jumped when something appeared in front of Rosalie. It was a pizza box. When she opened it, she squealed in happiness. Harry had sent a fresh pizza from her favorite place. She had eaten there when they went to visit Italy a month or so ago. Of course, using Harry's powers. She only ate for taste back then. Now she was eating for the baby. "Thanks, Harry," she muttered as she gobbled down a slice. "Where is he, dear?" Esme asked, running her fingers through Rosalie's hair. "He wanted to give us time as a family and not butt in." She rolled her eyes, leaning against Emmett's side. Alice shook her head and smiled. She was dying to ask about her time with Harry but felt that it would be incredibly tactless to do it in front of her husband. "By the way, where's Edward?" Rosalie wondered. "Where else?" Emmett snorted, holding her hand. "With Bella," she asked. Her family nodded. "Well, so far you seem to be in perfect health," Carlisle declared. He gently squeezed her arm and felt the softness of her flesh. "I must warn everyone to be careful with her. Her flesh is much softer than before." Everyone nodded. "Don't worry. I'm still much tougher than a human, she smiled as she bit down on another slice. Immortals. Harry spent his time away from Rosalie setting everything up. He made sure that the higher-ups knew what he was doing and got his meetings over and done with. Even though he wasn't with her physically, he was watching over her carefully. He treated all of his past wives the same. While it was true that Rosalie wasn't his wife, she was carrying his child, and as such, she warranted his utmost attention. While giving her time with her family, Harry explored the surrounding area. Even though he had been in Forks for a while, he didn't do much exploring. He was always with Bella, or someone else. He wasn't surprised when Leah had found him. Apparently, she sniffed him out while in wolf form and tracked him down. She wasted no time in phasing back into human form and jumping on his cock. He fucked her hard and fast right up against a tree. Just how she liked it. On his journey, he had also run across Jessica Stanley, who made it very clear that she was looking forward to some time alone with him. She even hinted that she could call up Angela and turn it into a group date. Harry would definitely be giving her a call soon. Right then, he had other things to worry about. It was a few days after leaving Rosalie at home that he was called back. When he appeared, Rosalie smacked into him and hugged him tightly. Harry wrapped an arm around her and held her to his side. He smiled and waved at everyone. Bella walked up and hugged him as well. I've missed you, Bella told him, hugging him again. Soon, both girls let him go and walked back to their respective partners. With that, Harry froze everyone except Emmett. So how have you been handling it? You know, since she returned, Harry tilted his head toward a frozen Rosalie. Emmett sighed. It's weird and was a bit awkward at first, but we've been doing well. I thought that it would be even harder, but I'm glad that I was wrong, he confessed. Harry nodded. In truth, Harry was tempering his emotions a bit. He was doing the same to the rest of the family as well. It was actually Rosalie that asked him to do it. She didn't want Emmett to suffer because of her desire to be a mother, and she didn't want her family acting weird. Harry thought that it was a reasonable request. He wasn't taking away their free will. He was just making sure that they didn't suffer unnecessarily. He would stop after a while, once everyone got used to the situation. Harry was happy to know that they were doing okay. He kept an eye on Rosalie but blocked out their personal time and conversations. He had promised Rosalie that he would. When he unfroze everyone, they all talked and discussed the situation and decided the best course to keep Rosalie and the rest of the family safe. It was the following day that Bella demanded some time with him. She hadn't been to the island in a couple of weeks, and she was getting sick of being cold. She needed a bit of sand and sun in her life. He happily obliged her request. Of course, he forced her back into her tiny bikini and made sure to ogle her at every opportunity. He watched as she happily splashed around in the warm ocean water. Hey, Harry, she suddenly said. Yeah, Bells? Harry asked, appearing next to her. You know that I'm planning to become one of the Cullens very soon, right? Like not long after graduation, she explained. Harry nodded. I had a feeling it would be soon, he said. He reached out and placed his hands on her hips. He slid them up her body and enjoyed the sensation of his hands gliding up her smooth, pale skin. I'm going to miss your softness and warmth. Bella blushed. She squeaked when he lifted her up by her bottom. On instinct, she wrapped her legs around his waist. She shuddered when his lips found her belly button. Her hands threaded through his wet hair as his tongue tickled her belly. Well, I was hoping that maybe sometime in the future maybe you would do what you did for Rosalie for me, she blushed. You want to have a baby someday? Harry asked, his lips against her soft skin. I'm not sure, but probably, she gasped as his tongue wiggled inside of her belly button. Her pussy was beginning to tingle badly. I think that something could be arranged, he said, smirking as he peeled the panties right off of her wet pussy. Bella felt them slip off of her dainty feet as she was lifted further up. Blushing deeply, she opened her legs as he rested her on his shoulders. His face pressed against her hairless mound. She knew that she should feel guilty about fooling around with Harry when she was back with Edward, but she didn't. At least not completely. It was his fault that Harry was in her life, and Bella cared for him deeply. Besides, Edward wanted to wait until marriage for any physical stuff. Harry had no problems pleasuring her in any way that she desired. Just as she thought that her pussy was brought up to his mouth, and Bella threw her head back and screamed as his tongue touched her hard clit. The explosive orgasm that followed was one of the best of her life. Bella's eyes fluttered as hot water rained down on her, and Harry's hands were tightly gripping her soap-slickened bottom. Holding her up, he pressed her again. Saint the tile wall of the large and luxurious shower that they were sharing. Bella couldn't help but grind her wet and throbbing pussy against his rock-hard abs. She loved feeling his lips kiss and nip at the sensitive skin of her neck. She gasped when his fingers accidentally slipped between her wet cheeks and touched her asshole. "Harry," she gasped out in a whisper. "You have to hurry, or I'll be late," Bella warned as her body rose up, and his lips moved from her neck down to her breasts. She continued to rise higher into the air, his lips leaving her breasts and kissing down her slim belly. Over her hairless mound, they went until they were at her naked pussy. Bella once again had her legs open for him. He had her body pinned against the wall and was holding her up by her thighs that were spread wide open. Her little pink pussy lips were practically quivering in anticipation. Harry stared at her entrance and watched as beads of arousal dripped off of her and fell onto the shower floor. Remembering that she had places to be, Harry leaned in and licked the pussy juice from her wet cunt. Bella loved when he showed his physical power over her. Whenever he pinned her against the wall, or forced her body into a position that he liked, she nearly came on the spot. It was one of the reasons that she was so attracted to her boyfriend. Looking down just as his lips wrapped around her hard clit, she yelled out in bliss when it suddenly felt like a lightning bolt of pleasure hit her right between the legs. Her pussy started contracting and squirting violently. Harry was drinking down her fluids as her body shivered and wiggled in pleasure. Harry's hands held her firmly and made sure that she didn't fall to the ground. After a few minutes, he removed his mouth from between her legs and placed her over his shoulder. As he stepped out of the shower carrying her, she noticed that all of the water evaporated from their bodies. Harry gave her ass a hard slap before he tossed her onto the bed. Bella looked at him while breathing heavily. "You better get ready so I can take you back home," he smiled. Bella groaned and flopped back onto the bed. She was going out on a date with Edward that night. At least she experienced multiple orgasms so she wouldn't have to worry about Edward turning her on and leaving her high and dry again. Slowly she got up and began putting her clothes on. She blushed when she noticed that Harry was happily watching her. Her time at the beach with him had been better than she remembered. Immortals. Alice Cullen was humming a tune as she danced into the family house. At the moment, she really didn't have much to do. Rosalie was off with their parents doing baby stuff, and because Emmett didn't want to miss a moment of Rose's pregnancy, he had been neglecting his hunting habits. With eyes that were charcoal black, Emmett was forced to leave and go sat his thirst. He wanted to just go grab a quick few deer, but Rosalie put a stop to that. She told him to travel north and get a few grizzlies before coming back home. Reluctantly, he agreed. Alice had hunted just a few days ago, so she was already taken care of. Her husband Jasper hadn't hunted in over a week, so Alice told him to go with Emmett. Even though she could see that Emmett would be fine, she still didn't want her family members to hunt alone. She often worried about Jasper and made him hunt much more often than the others. He was still relatively new to this vegetarian lifestyle, and with his background, he found it more difficult than everyone else. She loved how hard he tried and never chastised him when he failed. Edward was, of course, out with Bella, and she saw that he wouldn't return home until morning. So with all of her family members out and about, she twirled into the Cullen house, not expecting a pair of eyes to meet hers. "Harry," she squeaked in surprise. He was practically the only person that could truly surprise her. He once told her that he was normally hidden from her talents, but that he could be seen by her if he decided to let her. He had even proved his claims by letting her see his future. Harry was sitting on the couch watching TV. She bounced up to him and plopped down on the couch next to him. "Hey, Alice," he replied, not taking his eyes off the television. Instead, he was absent-mindedly munching on a bag of caramel popcorn. "What are you watching?" the little vampire asked, looking at the TV. "It's this show called The Hills. That blonde girl just moved to LA and is starting to work in the fashion industry or something," Harry told her. When she heard fashion industry, Alice was hooked. They continued to watch the show while Alice was glued to the couch. Harry held out the bag of popcorn to her. She looked at it before looking away. I can't eat that. Harry rolled his eyes. Try it, he told her. Alice looked at it warily but tried nonetheless. Her eyes widened. Is that what it tastes like to humans? She asked excitedly. Harry nodded as she scooped even more out of the bag to eat. When the show ended, Alice groaned in disappointment. That show was so good. I can't wait till next week, she exclaimed and instantly went on a rant about fashion. I love being a vampire, but sometimes it really sucks not being able to go out in the daytime. I'd love to go to LA and shop all day long, she said, leaning back on the couch. Harry wanted to laugh when her legs didn't touch the ground. At 4 feet 10 inches in height, she was used to such things. I can take you anywhere you want to go. LA, Paris, Milan, wherever you want, Harry told her, balling up the popcorn bag before making it disappear. Right now? She asked excitedly, hopping to her feet. Sure, he replied, standing as well. He groaned as he stretched his back. While he was stretching, Alice zoomed out of the room before coming back only a moment later. She was all dressed and done up. Alice was very thin and fairy-like in form, Harry thought. Our skin was just as pale as the rest of the Cullens and had no visible imperfections. Her hair was ink black and cropped short, and it was styled into spikes that pointed in every possible direction. Alice had very large eyes that were currently the color of darkening butterscotch. Her brows were perfect and delicate looking, and her lashes were long and full and seemed to flutter when she batted her eyes. A kind smile always seemed to be plastered across her face, which showed off her perfect, pearly white teeth. Harry noticed that Alice always smelled better than the rest of her family. All vampires naturally smelled good, but he suspected that Alice added perfumes and whatnot that accentuated her natural smell. I'm ready, she chirped, rolling on the balls of her heeled feet. Got your credit cards? Harry chuckled, teasing the tiny vampire. I never leave home without them, she smiled cutely. Harry shook his head and laughed. I believe you. So, where are we going? Harry asked. Alice thought about it for a second. Considering that it's nighttime in Europe, I think that Los Angeles will suit me just fine. She was ready to burn a hole in her wallet. The TV show had lit a fire in her that only a mountain of new clothes could put out. All right, let's go, he told her, holding out his hand. She bounced up to him and grabbed his hand before they both disappeared. Immortals, can you send these bags back home? Thanks, she chirped as he waved his hand and sent bags of her purchases home for what must have been the 1000th time. As soon as they were gone, she already grabbed his arm and pulled him back onto the sunny sidewalk of Rodeo Drive. Alice was a terror when it came to shopping. If she saw something that she liked, she bought one in every color. Of course, the salespeople practically drooled over her. The commissions alone would likely be more than they made in several months. As day turned into night, she reluctantly decided to put an end to her shopping trip. But not before making him promise to take her to Europe so that she could empty their stores as well. Harry promised that he'd take her whenever she wanted. When they arrived back at the Cullen house, her arms wrapped around his waist. And she hugged him tightly. Thanks for hanging out with me today, she said, looking up at him with her big, beautiful eyes. Harry smiled in return. Anytime, he told her before disappearing and leaving her with a semi-truckload of merchandise that she had no room for. Deciding to go to the diner for something to eat, he reappeared in the parking lot as Angela Weber was leaving with what appeared to be her family. When she saw him, her eyes widened, and her cheeks turned pink. Angela, it's nice to see you again, Harry smiled and walked up to the family. Angela stuttered a bit when introducing him to her parents and younger, twin brothers. Harry noticed that her mother was checking him out while trying to make it unnoticeable. She introduced him as a friend of Bella's that she had met. Before she left, he whispered in her ear for her to come over to his place that night. He could tell that she was incredibly embarrassed but happy nonetheless. Harry went into the diner to order his hamburger to go. Angela must have been eager because once he went back to his place, he barely had time to finish his food before she pulled up in her car. Meeting her at the door, he ushered her in while taking her coat. He saw that she was wearing the normal outfit for this area of the country: jeans, sneakers, and a long-sleeved shirt. After hanging up her coat, he moved behind her and placed his hands on her hips. Angela gasped as her body jumped in surprise. Harry moved her hair out of the way and leaned in. Angela's heart was hammering and he arched chest as his lips touched the side of her slender neck. I can see that you didn't invite Jessica along. I guess that you wanted me all to yourself tonight, Harry teased. Angela's cheeks burned in embarrassment as a shuddered gasp left her mouth. His hands slid up her long torso and cupped her shirt-covered breasts. When Harry had invited her over, Angela practically squealed in excitement. She did, in fact, think about calling up Jessica, but decided against it. She didn't want to admit it, but she did want him all to herself that night. She wanted his lips touching only her body. She wanted him to only thrust between her legs. She felt kind of bad for not inviting her friend, but in the end, she figured that they could join forces again next time. Her eyes fluttered as his strong hands massaged her breasts over her shirt. When his hands lowered and grabbed the hem of her shirt, she lifted up her arms and allowed him to remove her shirt. As her shirt was dropped to the ground, his hands were now all over her bare breasts. Her body trembled wildly as his fingers brushed over her hard nipples. When his fingers pinched and pulled at them, she couldn't help but grind her ass against his erection. Your skin is so soft, he complimented as he nipped at her shoulders. She held her breath as his hands lowered, and his fingers began to unbutton her jeans. As the zipper lowered, he started tugging them down. Angela shimmied her hips to help him pull them down. They fell past her knees, and Angela squealed when his hands groped her thighs and his lips began to nip at the skin of her cheeks. She could feel her underwear slipping between her cheeks and creating an enticing view for him. Suddenly, he started sucking on her exposed cheek while his hand crept up the inside of her thigh and touched her wet panties. Her body shuddered as he rubbed the damp material that was clinging to her plump lips. She knew that he would be leaving a hickey on her bottom, but she didn't care. She'd wear it as a badge of honor. Bend over, Harry's commanding voice rang through her ears. Without hesitating, she bent over and felt him peel the panties down her legs. She gasped as the wet material that was sticking to her soft skin was removed and a rush of cool air hit her overheated pussy. His hands spread her cheeks apart, and Angela looked over her shoulder wildly as he licked her tight, little asshole. Suddenly, she was in his arms before being placed on his bed. Her shoes and socks were tossed aside, and her jeans soon joined them. All that she had on was the panties that were just above her knees. Harry placed her legs together and pushed them up into the air. Her panties were tugged up her legs until they left her bare feet. She was just about to open her legs for him when he told her to keep them like that. Blushing, she did what he said. She watched as he removed all of his clothes. She marveled at the size of the monstrosity that was hanging between his legs. His hand was stroking the beast, making it longer and harder than it was only a moment ago. He settled into his position and placed her crossed ankles over one of his broad shoulders. Angela's body shivered as she felt him drag the head of his beastly cock up and down her dripping slit. When it was in position, he plunged deep into her, causing her to cry out in pleasure and arch her back. Instantly, her pussy clamped down on him. And she came violently. The night certainly didn't end there. Her body was folded into a mating press where her G-spot was nearly destroyed by this massive, thrusting cock. While she was still coming, she was flipped over and taken doggy style. Harry violated every inch of her body that night, and she loved it. Near comatose, she ended the night draped over his naked body where she fell asleep with a big smile on her face. Hey Rosalie, she suddenly heard a voice blare in her ear. A loud and embarrassing yelp of fright later, and she was glaring at the perpetrator while breathing rapidly. Do you want to get slapped? She threatened as Harry jumped over the back of the couch and plopped down next to her. He was the only person who even stood a chance of catching her off guard. And that was because he could literally appear out of thin air. Harry looked out of one of the many windows that adorned the walls of the Cullen house and saw Emmett and Jasper play fighting in the yard. The ground and grass were torn up, and he guessed that Esme would ask him to fix it up later. Speaking of Esme, he saw her huddled with Alice while going over baby books. None of them even acknowledged that he arrived, which Rose found strange. Are you making everyone ignore us? She asked him. Harry nodded. Yep, I wanted to ask you about them, he said, pointing over to the two women with the 10-foot stack of baby-based literature. What about them? Rose asked, turning back to the show that she was watching. Harry smirked and spun her until her back was facing him. His hands began rubbing and massaging her shoulder. Rose's eyes fluttered, and she let out a deep moan. She was suddenly glad that no one could see them. His hands continued to caress her pregnant body while he moved her long blonde hair aside and started kissing and sucking on her neck. Rosalie tilted her head to the side to give him more room. When his hands slid underneath her shirt and cupped her bare breasts, Rose leaned back against him and let him do whatever he wanted to her. As his fingers toyed with her incredibly hard nipples, he continued with his questioning. "You know what I'm talking about," he told her while the tips of his fingers gently brushed over the delicate skin underneath her big breasts. "They've been acting weird. I try to respect everyone's privacy, but eventually, I'll crack and listen in. I'd feel better if you just told me." Rosalie smirked as she moved her body around to get comfortable. Grabbing his hand, she placed it on the crotch of her jeans as she spread her legs apart. "If you make me come, then maybe I'll tell you," she teased as she rubbed herself against his hand. "Oh really?" Harry chuckled. Rosalie nodded and closed her eyes, knowing that he would never deny her anything. Least of all the pleasure that only he could provide. Emmett already knew that there was a possibility that she might be unable to stop herself from jumping into his bed again while pregnant. Their connection was simply too powerful to deny. Besides, he was the father of her child after all. He might not like it, but he accepted it. She already agreed that he could choose a human female to have a child with that they would raise as theirs. She wouldn't deny him if he needed to take care of her needs while pregnant. "With your family right here," he said as his fingers undid the buttons of her jeans. "It's making it more exciting," she gasped as he disappeared and reappeared at her feet. Grabbing her jeans, he started moving them down her legs while she lifted up her ass. He could just magic them off, but he preferred to do it the old-fashioned way. Rose closed her eyes and relished in the sensation of his hands sliding down her soft and smooth legs as he pulled her jeans off. Rosalie kicked her shoes off as the jeans reached her feet. Pulling them off, Harry tossed them onto the ground before grabbing her foot. Removing her sock, he placed his thumb on the sole of her foot and added a bit of his godly magic to it. When he started kneading it, Rosalie practically melted into the couch. Immediately her scent became overwhelming. Harry had to use his powers to keep the others from smelling her lovely scent. Instantly, he saw a wet patch appear on the part of her panties that was right above her slit. "A deal's a deal, so speak up, you con artist." Harry smiled as he gently tickled her foot and made her laugh. "Esme and Alice have been talking about having a baby as well. I don't think that they've brought it up with their husbands yet. But I think that it's only a matter of time," Rosalie moaned as Harry moved onto her other foot. "Really?" Harry wondered as he placed his hands on Rose's knees and pushed them up. The crotch of her panties was now fully exposed. And Harry could see how wet that they truly were. The thin material was completely soaked and was clinging tightly to her engorged pussy. He could see the exact shape of her plump and perfect lips through her drenched underwear. Leaning down, he kissed her knee gently and hit her with his power. Rosalie squealed and came hard, her body bucking and thrashing. Ari kept her safe with his powers as his hands explored the vast amount of smooth skin on display. Esme especially. She squealed while his hand cupped her panty-covered pussy. "She's always wanted a baby nearly as much as I do. I assume that they'll want to wait until after you've given birth," Harry said as he reached out for her chest and grabbed her shirt. With barely any effort on his part, her shirt was torn completely open. And her perfect tits bounced and flopped around from his rough treatment. Next, he reached down and tore her panties off in the same way. Rosalie gasped as her ripping wet pussy was exposed to the warm air of the house. "Yes," she choked out as Harry's fingers started playing with her swollen clit. "They want to see what happens with me so they know what to expect," she confessed. "Interesting," Harry said in his sing-song voice. "Now will you please fuck me?" Rosalie cried out, opening her legs wide and offering her body to him. Harry's clothes disappeared as he settled on top of her and gave her the time of her life. Immortals. Bella was sitting in class with her chin resting on her palm while she unknowingly tapped her pen against the hard surface of her desk. Glancing up at the clock, she sighed. It was one of those rare sunny days in Forks, Washington, and as tradition, the Cullens suddenly disappeared to go camping. At least they did before meeting Harry. Bella hoped that with Harry around he would use his powers to keep them from looking sparkly when in direct sunlight. It always annoyed her when Edward had to leave her because of the stupid sun. Sadly, Harry hadn't been around for a couple of days. She wasn't exactly sure what he was doing, but she guessed that he was having another one of his meetings with the higher-ups. OL had seemed long and boring without the Cullens around to brighten her day. She was just waiting for the final bell to ring so that she could go home and see Edward. English was usually her favorite class, but not today. Today she was eagerly waiting for Mr. Bertie to come in and begin class so that the day could end all that much faster. That's why when Harry walked into the class instead of her regular teacher, she immediately straightened up in her chair. She heard the intake of many female breaths as they got a glimpse of his heavenly body. Looking over to her friends, she could see Angel and Jessica blushing while desperately trying to fix their makeup. They weren't the only ones. Practically every girl in class was doing something to make themselves look better. Bella rolled her eyes while many of the boys gritted their teeth in annoyance. I'll be filling in for Mr. Bertie today since it's clear that he won't be showing up. I'm Mr. Potter, Harry said, grabbing a piece of chalk and writing his name on the board. We'll be starting on a new piece of literature today, one that I've studied extensively. Please reach under your chairs and grab your books, Harry told them. Bella looked confused. She didn't remember any books underneath her chair. Reaching down, she grabbed hold of the book and pulled it up. Eek! Bella squeaked and accidentally dropped the book onto her desk. The words Kama Sutra filled the front cover along with a picture of a crudely drawn Indian couple. Gasps and giggles filled the room. She looked at Harry with wide eyes and saw a cheeky smile across his handsome face. Open your books now. Don't be shy, he told them as he walked around the class. Bella sighed and cracked hers open. Ms. Swan, be a dear and read position number 1. Bella decided that she was going to kill him. With a red face, she stuttered, the piledriver. She could hear her classmates giggling. A personal favorite of mine. Used on the girls that are a bit more adventurous than normal, he said, patting Jessica on the shoulder, which made her blush fiercely. Please continue, Ms. Swan. Number 2. The Mississippi mudslide, she stuttered, which earned some laughs. She had never been so embarrassed in her entire life. A truly advanced technique, one not to be attempted by the inexperienced, Harry declared happily. As he walked up and down the aisles, the eyes of every girl in class followed him. It looked as if they desperately wanted him to try out these techniques on them. Number 3, he called out. Bella looked back at the book. Over the shoulder boulder holder, she said with a quiver. A loud snort followed many giggles. I'm an expert at this maneuver. It takes skill and stamina to achieve your goal, but if done right, it will have them coming back for more. Continue, Ms. Swan. With a shaky breath, she continued, the ring around Uranus. As everyone burst out laughing, she had had enough. Harry. She stood up glaring, crossing her arms over her chest. Instantly, everyone in class froze. Yes, Ms. Swan. He smirked. Will you shut up with the Ms. Swan crap? I can't believe you embarrassed me, she groaned and covered her face. Relax, P-Brain. You've still got a few hours before school is over, so I figured that I'd come and rescue you. We can hang out until it's time for you to go home, Harry chuckled and sat on her desktop. Really? She asked hopefully. Yes. Now gather your stuff, he told her. Bella quickly packed her backpack as all the copies of the Kama Sutra disappeared. Will everyone remember what happened here? No. They won't remember anything, he promised. Good. By the way, where's Mr. Bertie? She wondered. I knocked him out and stuffed him in the janitor's closet, Harry smiled innocently. Harry. She derided him, but couldn't help but smile back. With a snap of his fingers, Mr. Bertie's disheveled body appeared at the front of the class. He was standing, but frozen like everyone else. Ready? Harry asked, holding out his hand. Ready? She happily replied and grabbed his hand. She saw everyone begin to move just as they disappeared. A moment later, she reappeared on her favorite beach with Harry by her side. Do you want to swim or catch some sun? He asked her as their normal supplies began to appear. 2 beach chairs along with a cooler of their favorite drinks materialized as It's sunblock and some very large and fluffy beach towels. Bella thought about it for a moment. Sun for now, she said, then squealed and covered her body when her clothes disappeared. Harry. Tan Lee. NES are the enemy of women all over the world, he wisely told her. Since he had seen her naked many times, she huffed and laid on her beach chair. What about Eskimo women? She asked as Harry appeared. Ed next to her with the bottle of sunblock in his hand. She moaned when he began applying it to every inch of her exposed body. They have beaches in Alaska, you know, he said as his hand slid up the inside of her sexy thigh. Bella gasped when the side of his hand touched her burning hot pussy. I'll take your word for it, she moaned and decided to enjoy the next few hours with her godly friend. Warm water sprayed down on Leah Clearwater as she knelt in the shower. Towering over her was the object of her affection, Harry Potter. Her soapy hands traveled up his strong, powerful thighs, feeling every ripple in his muscles. When her hands touched the V of his lower abdomen, her pussy fluttered. She still found it hard to believe that a being so perfect could exist. Well, physically he was perfect, she thought. He could be downright annoying at times. As her hands slid over the six-pack of abs, she decided to forgive him for his annoyances. Leah grabbed the bottle of liquid soap that was resting on the shower floor right next to her. Flipping open the cap lid, she squirted a healthy amount on the long, rigid cock that was pointing right at her. Placing the bottle back down, she used 2 hands to massage the soap into his soft skin. Smiling when she heard him moan, she continued to give him a double-handed jerk-off. Harry looked down at the nude girl and smiled. Her enthusiastic movements were causing her lovely breasts to shake and jiggle. It certainly was a heavenly sight to behold. I don't think it's going to get any cleaner, he teased as one of her hands started playing with his bloated sack while the other began moving faster and faster. Any normal girl's hand would have been tired by then, but her wolf form granted her extra strength and, more importantly, stamina. Leah looked at the suds-covered cock and was nearly overcome with the desire to stick it in her mouth. Ignoring that feeling, she looked up and met his gaze. Smiling, she replied, now that it's been buffed, it needs to be polished. He watched as she squirted more soap onto her chest. His eyes tracked the glob of soap as it slowly rolled down her beautifully colored skin until it disappeared into the valley between her wet breasts. She placed her hand between her breasts and began rubbing the soap all over her. She smirked at him when she saw that his eyes never left her soapy chest. Taking his massive shaft, she placed it snugly between her tits and pressed them together. Once he was secure, she began bouncing them up and down. In Harry's opinion, she was being a bit too smug about her sexiness. As she gave him her soapy tit job, he hit her with his powers. A loud, sudden squeal reverberated off the tiled walls of the shower. She looked up at him with wide eyes before he hit her again. She squealed again, this time jumping from the sudden and intense pleasure. His cock slipped from between her breasts as she placed her hands on the ground to steady herself. Hitting her again, she cried out. And her body trembled violently as it was rocked with a massive orgasm. Her body spasmed out of control, and she curled up on her side as pussy juice squirted from her fluttering slit. I was nearly out of it when she suddenly realized that she was no longer in the shower. Instead, she was dry and warm and on Harry's big bed. He positioned her on her belly and used his powers to lift her hips high into the air. With her face and chest flat against the bed, she pitifully turned her head and howled when his giant horsecock penetrated her down to her cervix with a single thrust. Because of her healing abilities, Harry never took it easy on her. He plowed and jackhammered into her contracting quim over and over. No matter how much she begged for mercy, he never stopped until he was done with her. She was forced to suffer one orgasm after another while being brutally fucked doggy style. Leah closed her eyes and bit down on the sheets as her pussy once again squeezed his cock tightly. Her body wanted his seed. Her body wanted to carry his child. Her walls rolled and undulated against him while he pistoned in and out of her. When he finally came, her pussy continued to milk his cock until every last drop was inside of her. Immortals. Harry smiled at yet another sexy Brazilian woman as he walked down the bustling streets of Rio de Janeiro. The night was warm, and the air smelled of the ocean that was only a short drive away. As he passed by another nightclub, he could hear and feel the thumping beat of the music being played within. A feminine hand grabbed his as he walked by, begging in Portuguese for him to join her in her festivities. Harry politely declined. It wasn't that he was disinterested in a night of fun. It was just that he didn't find her interesting. She was just an average-looking woman doing average human things. These days it took more than that to catch his fancy. For the last month or so, Harry had been exploring this version of Earth in greater detail. Rosalie was nearing the mid-stage of her pregnancy, and Emmett was becoming very protective. It wasn't a slight against Harry. It was just the nature of vampires. Even during the best of times, they were extremely protective of their mates. Now that Rosalie was very vulnerable, Emmett would hardly let anyone close to her, even his own family members. Harry felt that it was best to give them a little bit of space. He made sure to keep a close eye on Rosalie all day every day using his powers. If anything even threatened a hair on her head, it would be vaporized. Of course, he still occasionally popped back to Forks to see Bella or Leah, but his visits were few and far between, much to the annoyance of the girls. Harry had to roll his eyes at that. Now that he was tied to the Cullens through Rosalie's child, it wasn't like he'd not be around. He'd be with them until their end. As Bella planned to become one of them, he'd likely be in her life for thousands of years. As for Leah, she'd stay young for as long as she continued to phase. Eventually, she might imprint or decide to stop phasing altogether. If she did, Harry would make sure that she was well taken care of until the end of her days. But while they were all young and semi-immortal, he found it comical that they would get so annoyed that he wasn't around. He reminded himself that they were young and still didn't understand the true scope of time. To him, 1,000 years was nothing. He suddenly felt the sensation of someone trying to contact him. He knew that it was either Rosalie or Bella. The Cullens knew that they were the only ones who could successfully get him to come back. Concentrating a little harder, he felt that it was Bella. Sighing, he faded from the raucous and lively street. Almost instantly, he was back in the cold and dreary Pacific Northwest. Standing underneath Bella's window, he quietly said, "I'm here," knowing that Special Ed could hear him. Sure enough, the window opened, and Bella silently waved him in. Appearing in her room just as the window closed, he used his powers to create a sound-dampening ward around her room. "Charlie won't hear us," Harry told them. Edward nodded. "So what's the problem?" "Victoria," Bella told him, clearly nervous. "The hunter's mate?" Harry asked. "Yes, she's been seen around these parts. The wolves have been chasing her away," Edward said the last part with more than a little distaste. Harry already knew about the animosity between the vampires and the local tribe. "I haven't been keeping track of her. I figured that she got the point when I killed her lapdog, Laurent." Quote. Edward Winston shook his head. "No, she'll keep going until either Bella or she is dead. Our kind can become unhinged if our mates are harmed or killed. I doubt that she'll listen to reason. Well, you need to find her and either convince her or kill her. I'll only step in if Bella is in serious danger. I'm already pressing my luck with the head honchos." Seeing that Bella was still nervous, he continued. "Don't worry, Bells. Nothing will happen to you. I'll even watch out for your dad," Harry promised. Bella nodded and hugged him. "I'll go see Rosalie before I continue my vacation. I'll check back in with you soon," he told them before disappearing. Meanwhile, at the Cullens, Rosalie stuffed another Twinkie into her mouth as she watched a movie from the 1930s. Movies from around that time period were her favorites. Esme was knitting at a human's pace while Alice was looking through a catalog. Jasper kept one eye on the movie and the other on his wife. Carlisle was in his study reading a medical journal while Emmett was sitting protectively beside her. When she looked at him, all that she could feel was guilt. His eyes were black fro. Hunger and no amount of scolding would convince him to go and feed. She jumped when a tree branch slammed into the roof of their house. Jasper walked to the door and opened it up. Instantly, the living room was filled with a strong wind. "The weather's getting bad. Some of the trees might snap," he called out. Within a second, the entire family was standing just outside the door. Of course, Emmett kept her behind him protectively. Rosalie was just about to roll her eyes in annoyance when she spotted something. Something was high up in the air. It was a small speck, but every second it was getting bigger. "What's that?" she asked, pointing up in the air. Jasper walked further out onto the lawn to get a better look. Whatever it was coming fast. Before he could even blink, it was the size of a house. In fact, it was a house. A house was falling from the sky while spinning around violently. "Ah arg!" he yelled in fright, throwing his hands out in fear. The last thing he saw was the underside of an old, white farmhouse. With a loud boom, the house landed. The Cullens turned their heads to avoid the dirt and dust from the terrible landing. Suddenly, the wind stopped. "Jasper!" Alice cried out and ran to the spot where her husband just was. The family gasped when only his legs could be seen sticking out from underneath the house. His muffled voice could barely be heard, but it almost sounded like, "Jeremy, grab his legs and pull." Emmett shouted, trying not to laugh. He grabbed his legs and pulled with all his might. Unfortunately, the only thing that gave way was Jasper's pants. With a loud rip, Emmett was standing there holding the shredded remnants of a pair of slacks. Alice bent down to grab his feet, but sadly, they curled up and slid underneath the house. They all jumped when the door banged open and Harry came out petting a little, black terrier. "Harry!" Rosalie cheered happily. A none too pleased Jasper trotted out from behind him and Snady C. had his torn pants from Emmett as he walked back into the house. Alice chased after him while the house and dog disappeared. Was that really necessary? Esme smiled at him. Harry shrugged and escorted Rosalie back into the house. "Hey there, Big Mama." Harry greeted the future mother of his child. "How are you feeling? If you call me Big Mama again, I'll have to smack you," she told him as she sat back on her spot. Emmett was about to sit next to her when Harry stopped him. "Go feed. You can't protect Rosalie if you're distracted and weakened by hunger," Harry ordered. He was about to argue when Harry went on. "Victoria has been spotted around Forks. I doubt that she's here to make amends." Emmett winced and finally gave in. "Take Jasper with you. Apparently, the wolves are on high alert, so stay away from the border." After quick goodbyes, the two brothers left. Rose smiled and patted the spot next to her. Harry sat down and she scooted closer to him, Twinkie in hand. "Those things will kill you," he said, indicating to the Twinkie. "I'm already dead," she replied smartly, stuffing another in her mouth. "Thanks for making him go hunting." He was being unreasonable. "No problem," he said, watching whatever crap that she had on TV. "Where have you been?" she suddenly asked, turning to him. "Traveling. Turns out that this Earth isn't all that different from most that I've been to. I plan to continue my trip when Emmett gets back." "Where will you go?" Rose asked, setting her box of goodies aside. "I was thinking maybe Alaska," he responded. "You should visit our cousins while you're there." Esme smiled beautifully as she looked up from her knitting. The Denali Coven. Rose had told him a little about the only other, vegetarian vampires, that they knew of. Supposedly, they were very nice and pleasant to be around. He thought about it for a moment and decided that it would be nice to drop in and see what they were about. "Sounds good," Harry smiled back at her and spent the rest of his time doing little things to annoy Rosalie. At the highest peak of the mountain, most people wouldn't expect to see a gorgeous, blonde girl sitting on a rock staring off into the vast distance of the Alaskan wilderness. Even though it was summer, it was still very cold up in the mountains, which made her seem all the more strange since she wasn't wearing nearly enough clothes to keep her warm. The blonde leaned forward and picked up a fist-sized rock. She absent-mindedly spun it in her palm as she thought about different things. The main one was the death of the man that she was considering as a mate. She begged him not to return to Forks, even if he was only doing a favor for a friend. After he didn't return, she contacted the Cullens to see if they had seen him. As it turned out, one of them had. The human that Edward was so infatuated with. They told her that Laurent had attacked Bella and that a friend of hers killed him before he could harm her. Obviously, Irina didn't believe them. She knew that they weren't telling her something. What kind of friend could kill a vampire? The girl was human and had no other vampire acquaintances beyond the Cullens. Irina suspected that the mongrels that lived nearby were to blame. Just thinking about them made her see red. Closing her fist in anger, the rock exploded into dust and pebbles. A sudden whistle of appreciation snapped her out of her thoughts. "You're pretty strong for such a small woman," came a heavenly-sounding voice from behind her. She had a hard time trying to describe it. It was strong, and yet soft at the same time. It was rich and velvety and made her skin crawl in a very good way. She was on her feet in less than a blink of an eye. Turning around, she was face to face with the most beautiful man that she had ever seen. She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. It was literally the first time that a man had rendered her speechless. He smiled happily at her. If she were human, She imagined that her face would be heating up right about then. As handsome as he was, however, he looked absurdly out of place. In fact, she was so out of it that she didn't even stop to ask. A human was standing on the peak of the tallest mountain in North America. He didn't even have any climbing gear. All that he had on was a skiing outfit with a snow cap and goggles placed up on his forehead. On his feet were a pair of alpine skis. What are you? She stumbled over her words. She was saved from further embarrassment when he answered her unasked questions. The name's Harry Potter. I'm a friend of Bella Swan and the Cullens. They told me that I should stop in and meet their cousins from up north. A pleasure to meet you, he told her. What he said suddenly triggered something. Friend of Bella. The same friend that killed Laurent. She clenched her fists tightly. One and the same, he told her without a hint of remorse. Irina suddenly hissed at him and got into a fighting stance. Why? She asked, wanting to know before she killed the man. He tried to kill Bella, and she's under my protection. Why? Was he something to you? He asked, raising an eyebrow at her behavior. He was my mate, she hissed. Harry, instead of being frightened by her, snorted in amusement. No, he wasn't. There was no bond between you both. Believe me, I would have known. All he was someone you liked and were attracted to. Nothing more. This did nothing to temper her anger. She was just about to scream and attack when suddenly, black military helicopters swooped in from above. They found me. Run! Harry Potter screamed at her. She watched in shock as he placed his goggles over his eyes and jumped off the fucking peak of the mountain. When bullets began peppering the ground near her, she decided to take his advice. She ran after him and easily caught up. He was bent at the waist while looking forward with his ski poles tucked under his arms to achieve max speed. His speed would be blinding for a human, but for her, she could easily keep up. He suddenly looked over his shoulder and yelled, "Shit." Looking back, she saw men in black commando suits, riding snowmobiles and chasing after him. One pulled out a grenade launcher and fired it. She tracked the projectile as it flew after him. At the last second, he veered left and used a large, sloping rock as a ramp. He flew up into the air as the ground beneath him exploded. He landed expertly and slalomed in and out of the way of dozens of boulders. A repeated crack of gunfire made her jerk in surprise. She turned her head and saw the men firing submachine guns at him. She didn't know what Harry pulled out, but when he fired it, a wire flew out from both sides and attached to a tree on either side of him. Being almost invisible, the first commando didn't see it and was thrown from his snowmobile when he ran into it. The others ducked underneath it, returning fire as they did. Harry suddenly swerved to his right, nearly hitting a very thick tree. The men followed him. Unfortunately, they didn't see the armed grenade sitting on the surface of the snow until it was too late. With a loud explosion, the rest of the men in snowmobiles went flying in every direction. Harry skidded to a sudden stop and moved his goggles back to his forehead, breathing heavily. Forgetting that she was mad at him, she stopped next to him. She squeaked when he suddenly pulled her into a hug. We did it. We've escaped. He cried out in joy, but a menacing rumble cut his victory short. Both of them looked up the mountain only to see an avalanche of snow coming at them. As rocks were demolished and trees were splintered, both of them could only say one word, shit. Harry put his goggles back on and hightailed it down the mountain. Irina running after him. Immortals. Tanya was sitting at her desk while browsing the internet. As much as she loved living in Denali, she found the shopping to be dreadful. Her only choices were to either go where the best stores were or shop online, which is what she was doing. Even though she loved shopping, as did her sisters, she was a little distracted. The reason for her distraction was because of her sister, Irina. She was beside herself with anger at the death of Laurent and blamed the Cullens for it. As the leader of the Denali coven, it was her duty to try and smooth things over between everyone. Carlyle was easy to placate. His gentle and forgiving nature was what drew her coven to his in the first place. Irina, on the other hand, could be more than a handful. While normally a very pleasant woman, she could be quite stubborn at times. With Laurent's death, for example, she was digging in her heels, and it was creating a fracture in their relationship with the Cullens. At the moment, she really didn't know what to do about it other than supporting her sister. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an avalanche in the distance followed by a feminine shriek. The sounds were so far away that no human would have been able to hear them from that distance, but she was no normal human, and she knew that voice from anywhere. It belonged to her sister, Irina. In less than a second, she was in the living room of their house and was quickly followed by her other family members. "That was Irina's voice," said Carmen, going to the window and looking out of it. She couldn't see anything from that angle. "Let's go see what's going on," Kate said, disappearing out the door. The others ran after her. Since the mountain wasn't far from their home, they were able to get there in only a handful of seconds. Looking up the slope, they could see the wall of snow barreling toward them in the distance. They couldn't see Irina, but they did see a male figure that appeared to be skiing. If Tanya was honest, he looked like a pro in his movements. He was expertly zipping in and out of rocks while racing the deluge of snow. As it got closer and closer, so did he until finally he skidded to a stop right in front of them, his cheeks pink and his warm breath billowing out a cloud of cold mist. Right behind him, the avalanche finally came to a halt and ended at his heels. He lifted up his goggles and smiled. "Greetings on this fine day," he said cheerily. Not believing the craziness of the situation, Tanya cleared her throat and took charge since she was the leader of the coven. "Greetings," she said, stepping up. She was still looking around for Irina. "Have you by chance seen my sister? Short, pale blonde hair, goes by the name Irina." "Yes," Kate said, stepping up. "Where is she?" "She's around here somewhere," Harry muttered, turning around to take a look. Just then, a blonde head popped up out of the snow and spit out a mouthful of the white powder. She did not look pleased. "Immortals." Irina held back a snarl as she watched this Harry Potter fellow laugh and charm his way through her entire family. She also noticed how her traitorous sisters sat a little too close to him. Harry claimed to be some powerful deity, but she didn't see it. Maybe he was some sort of vampire using mind tricks on them. Either way, she was biding her time until she could strike out at him. He seemed to know this. She didn't know how, but every time that she had a terrible thought about him, he would look at her and smirk. Even then, he turned his head toward her. And Irina could have sworn that his eyes twinkled. "I can't believe that the Cullens never mentioned you," Eleazar said, laughing at his joke. "I asked to keep my presence a secret. I usually don't get involved in the lives of mortals," he told them. "Oh, stuff it," Irina blurted out. Every eye turned toward her, and if she had been human, she would have blushed. "He's obviously lying. What proof has he given to his claims? Not only that, but he killed Laurent." She snarled. "After he tried to kill Bella," he reminded her. She opened her mouth to say that he was lying when he stopped her. "Would you like to see what happened?" he suddenly asked her. She just stood there seething. "I would," Tanya joined in, and just like that, they were no longer in their cozy house, but standing in the middle of the rainforests of the Pacific Northwest. All of the Denalis jumped from being startled at the sudden change. They were about to ask what was going on when Harry pointed. They looked and saw Laurent menacingly stalking forward toward a cute human girl. "You don't want to do this, Laurent," Bella gasped out with a shaky breath. She could see the venom pooling in his hungry mouth. "Forgive me, Bella. It was not supposed to be this way, but I can't help myself. You smell too delicious. Victoria will not be pleased with me. She very much wanted to play with you before avenging James. At least with me, there will be no pain. I promise, Bella," they heard Laurent say before he held Bella in his arms. When he was just about to bite her, they watched as Harry ared out of thin air and raised his hand. A bolt of lightning blasted from his palm and struck Laurent on the shoulder. He corkscrewed through the air and hit the ground hard. He got back on his feet, crying out in pain. The Denalis winced at the gruesome wound. Laurent was then struck in the chest once again, and they watched as his body was blown to pieces. Suddenly, Bella was in Harry's arms. Rena sniffed at the semi-romantic sight of the pair. If this was true, then maybe she needed to admit that Laurent had brought the trouble on himself. Still, she cared about him and was still angry. "So this is Bella, Edward's human?" Tanya asked as Bella wrapped her arms around the other Harry's neck before disappearing. Suddenly, they were all back in their home. "Such a wonderful skill," Carmen gasped. They began talking and admitted that he was telling the truth when it came to Laurent. Even so, Irina wasn't going to let it go so easily. She didn't care how handsome or charming Harry Potter was. Irina irritatingly tapped her nails against the surface of the expensive mahogany table that she was sitting at. The cause of her irritation was abundantly clear. Harry Potter was relaxing on the couch, using the television remote to flip through stations while Tanya was sitting on one side and Kate on the other. One man had never brought out so many different emotions in her. On one hand, he was incredibly attractive, and she would like nothing more than to drag him to bed. On the other hand, she was still very angry at him, even though she didn't have any legit reason for being so. Unfortunately, there wasn't really anything that she could do about it other than sitting there and glaring, which she happily did. Harry was inwardly smiling. He found it very amusing that Irina was so annoyed with him. He found great satisfaction in doing little things to irritate her further. "That's a good show. Have you seen it?" Tanya suddenly said beside him. He turned to her and smiled. The leader of the Denali coven was pressed right up against him. She was wearing a cute, flowery skirt that was riding up her thighs as she sat there with crossed legs. "No, I don't get to watch much telly," he confessed and left the show on. With Irina watching so closely, he placed his hand on Tanya's thigh and gave it a squeeze. With his perfect senses, he could hear her nails hitting the wood a little too hard. He could hear the fibers of the wood break as she left small, crescent-shaped indents on the table's surface. Tanya didn't seem to mind. In fact, she placed her hand on top of his to stop him from moving it. Not to be outdone, Kate took his other hand and placed it on her thigh. Irina's eye twitched as she saw his hand climb a little too high in her opinion. "This is a very pretty dress," Harry complimented Kate, allowing his fingers to play with the hem of her short, summer dress. "Thank you," she smiled while her fingertips brushed over the soft skin of his forearm. "Sadly, I never get to wear it around here. Even though it's summer, it's still too cold for a human to wear something so thin and short. That's one of the negatives about living up here in the Alaskan mountains. I can imagine that it would be quite taxing being away from civilization for such long periods of time," he said as he let both of his thumbs rub circles on the insides of their thighs. Irina watched, head with glaring eyes as both girls shuddered with pleasure. The three sisters were no strangers to pleasure. For many hundreds of years, they had spent their time going from man to man, looking for something that they knew they would never find. The feeling of being whole was gone lost when their mother was so viciously destroyed by the Volturi. Sasha should have been smarter than she was. To create an immortal child was a death sentence, but she too was looking for a way to be whole. After her death, the sisters tried to drown themselves in the small pleasures that life could bring. All of it was just a way to distract themselves from the pain of loss. Their antics were so well known that they even spawned the legends of the succubus. Truthfully, very few things could actually bring them pleasure. Seeing her sisters shudder and their eyes roll into the backs of their heads certainly was intriguing, but not enough to forget her irritation at the green-eyed bastard. She was just glad that Carmen and Eleazar weren't here to see such a spectacle. They usually tried to keep their moments of entertainment away from the house. Thankfully, the pair were out spending some time alone, as mates often do. "It is." Tanya joined in, grabbing his attention. "But sadly, we can't spend our days out in the sun like everyone else. Would you like to spend today in the sun?" Harry asked. "I know of a nice little tropical island that's completely uninhabited." "Deal," Kate said excitedly. Within the blink of an eye, both sisters were in their rooms getting ready. Irina saw the annoying bastard smile at her. She huffed and crossed her arms in front of her chest as he got up and slowly stalked forward. "How about it, Irina?" He smirked at her. He dropped down to a knee right in front of her crossed, jean-covered legs. She was about to tell him to fuck off when he placed a hand on her knee. Instantly, it felt as if a bolt of pure pleasure traveled up her spine, making her body tremble along the way. It took all of her willpower to keep from moaning. Even so, she knew that he could feel her body trembling under his touch. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Once she was centered, she said, "Fine. But keep your hands to yourself." She smacked his hand away. She heard him chuckle as she stood up and slowly walked up the stairs to her room. Immortals. As all three sisters appeared on the fine, powdery sand, they squealed in excitement. Within an instant, they had their shoes off and were warming their icy cold feet in the burning hot sand. Sure, they were rich and semi-immortal. But they didn't get out as much as one would believe. Every new place that they visited was a risk. There was always an annoying vampire claiming that they were in their territory. Having someone like Harry around was certainly a blessing. They could imagine the possibilities of going anywhere that they wanted, anytime that they wanted. They were more than a little annoyed that the Cullens had gotten to him first. He watched as they blurred into the grove of palm trees and came back seconds later in their tiny bikinis. Harry did what he always did and conjured the necessities, including large beach towels and beach chairs for everyone. When her sisters ignored the beach chairs and pulled him out into the ocean, Irina sighed and went after them. She didn't want to be a party pooper after all. As soon as the waves began to splash on them, Irina began to feel a bit uplifted. It felt good to get out of the cold north for a while. Kate certainly thought so. She immediately pounced on Harry's back, hugging him around the neck while her smooth legs locked around his waist. His hands reached behind him and held her firmly by her ass. Since she was wearing a string bikini, he ended up with 2 handfuls of sexy vampire ass cheeks. Tanya was suddenly at his front, her hands traveling over his deliciously sculpted abs. Irina's eyes were locked on the beads of seawater that were dripping down the muscular ripples of his stomach. Her view was suddenly blocked by her sister when she pressed against him and giggled while nuzzling his neck with her nose. It was quite a feat for her since he was so tall. Eventually, Kate hopped down and they began splashing around in the water. At one point, Harry tossed Tanya hundreds of feet in the air. They watched as she landed about a mile offshore. All of them were laughing when she swam back a moment later. She came out of the water in a huff, holding her arm in front of her bare breasts. "My top ripped off," she declared as if they couldn't see that. She held up the bikini top which clearly had a broken string. "Perhaps you shouldn't have bought something so flimsy," Harry teased. Irina smirked, seeing an opportunity for payback. She slinked up behind him and grabbed his swim shorts. With a mighty heave, she tore them straight from his body. Harry, of course, knew what she was going to do, but didn't bother stopping her. Who was he to ruin someone else's fun? So when his shorts came off, he didn't bother covering up. "Looks like we're not the only ones wearing flimsy clothing," Irina teased from behind him. She moved her head around his body and looked down. The smile was instantly wiped from her face, replaced with a look of shock. Attached to his glorious body was the largest cock that she had ever seen. Rock hard and sticking straight out. It looked ready to tear her body in two. The continued silence told her that her sisters agreed with her sentiments. Harry turned to her. This time it was he who was smirking. His cock bobbed up and down as he moved. "Just couldn't wait to set little Harry free, huh?" he teased her. Irina cleared her throat and replied, "You wish," with a snort. Still, she couldn't take her eyes off of it. Kate certainly agreed. Her hand reached around him, and her fingertips brushed over his magnificent length. "It's so perfect," she said in amazement. Just like the rest of him, Tanya joined in. She reached down and cupped his low-hanging sack. His massive balls were spilling out of the palm of her small hand. She hefted them up and down gently, feeling their incredible weight. "There must be enough cum to impregnate 100 women in here," she joked while beginning to massage them. She made sure to rub her hard nipples against his wet body as much as she could. Irina wasn't surprised that her sisters already simultaneously started up with him. It wouldn't be the first time that the girls had shared a man. It wasn't strange or weird to them. Even though they called themselves sisters, they weren't actually related in any way. The only ones to have been actual family members were Sasha and Tanya. Seeing them going was really getting her in the mood. She couldn't help but brush her lips against his hard body. To a human, her lips would have been as hard as marble, but against his skin, they felt incredibly soft. Deciding to just give in and enjoy the day, she reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck. When Irina pulled his head down for a kiss, Harry didn't stop her. He captured her lips in a very passionate kiss. He could feel her moan as their tongues touched. Harry turned his body so that he was facing her and grabbed her by the backs of her thighs. He lifted her as if she weighed nothing. Her legs parted, letting him rest between them as she sucked on his tongue and furiously ground her damp pussy on him. With a couple of soft tugs, her bikini was completely torn from her body, leaving her nude in his arms. Irina broke the kiss and threw her head back when his fingers sank between her cheeks. His finger brushed against her asshole, and she felt the same spark of pleasure that she had before. Instantly, her pussy began contracting as she came violently. Her body was bucking uncontrollably in his grasp while her pussy squirted against his belly. She didn't even realize that her sister had grabbed his cock and held the tip against her tight slit until he penetrated her all the way to her cervix. Tanya smirked at her sister, Irina. Try as she might, Tanya knew that she wouldn't be able to stay mad at Harry for long. He was simply too delicious to ignore. Seeing her rolling her hips like a cowgirl riding a bucking bronco made her want to giggle. Irina was always the wildest in bed. Tanya pulled off her bikini bottoms and joined in. Beside her, Kate removed her bikini and also exposed her nude body. Their hands and tongues joined in, feeling and tasting every inch of skin that they could. The smell of sex and the sounds of wet, clapping skin was sending pleasant tingles up and down their spines. Irina's whorish cries of pleasure echoed across the water as she clenched tightly on him. Even though she was coming harder than she ever had, Potter never stopped his thrusting. He continued jackhammering into her like the brute that he was. It wasn't until she wrapped her arms tightly around his neck and squeezed him between her thighs that he let up. She slipped from his cock and splashed down into the water. The moment that his cock was free, both girls went for it. Being the leader of the coven, Tanya hissed to get her point across. Kate huffed but relented. It was a wonderful day for the sisters. Warm sun and sand and plenty of wild and passionate sex. They couldn't ask for anything more. Harry felt strong hands pin his chest down to the bed. While he could definitely power himself out of such a situation, under these circumstances, he chose not to. There wasn't a straight man on the planet who would. Irina leaned forward, putting her weight on him and holding herself up by using his muscular chest as leverage. Her hips were a blur, moving back and forth and sometimes in a circular motion, all the while. Her eyes fluttered and rolled into the back of her head. Her long, pale blonde hair was a mess from hours upon hours of hardcore fucking, and she wouldn't have had it any other way. Harry's massive girth could hit places that no other human or vampire had ever reached. His fat cock could stimulate every inch of her insides at the same time, and that was before he used any of his powers. Irina looked to the side. Kate was lying on the floor beside the bed, twitching uncontrollably while Tanya lay beside him. Tanya had her eyes open, but Irina could tell that she wasn't really seeing anything. She was in an orgasm-induced coma, likely daydreaming about all of the orgasms in her future that Harry would happily provide. On her face was a dopey smile, and her body was splayed out, completely nude. Between her parted legs, a trail of thick, white comb leaked from her destroyed pussy and dribbled down over her stretched asshole. The sight of it all only added to the naughtiness of the situation. Irina's already tight pussy was contracting even further, hugging his shaft in a way that would have crushed it if he were human. Her ass was literally a blur as she bounced it up and down at speeds that a human would be unable to see. To a human's ear, the clapping of her ass on his crotch would sound like one continuous crack of thunder. She was grateful that he was using his magic to blow any sound from leaving the room that they had given him in their Denali home. Feeling another orgasm approaching, she collapsed forward into his arms. Irina smiled prettily as he wrapped his arms around her waist and began thrusting upward. It amazed her how quickly her hatred turned to annoyance, then her annoyance turned to indifference. Now she was loath to let him out of her bed, let alone her sight. She mewed and nuzzled her face against his neck while his cock jackhammered into her spasming pussy. Even though she didn't need to breathe, she somehow huffed in and out raggedly, sucking in and expelling lungfuls of fresh air. The act of it made her feel more human. She hummed in pleasure as Harry's perfect cock was battering against her cervix. Harry, she squeaked as Arwal squeezed his thrusting cock harder than she thought was possible. Even a male vampire wouldn't have been able to continue thrusting into her from the sheer force that her pussy was exerting, but Harry was beyond them. Her pussy wanted him to remain inside, but he had other plans. Like hers, his hips blurred as he fucked her into oblivion. Fuck, she screamed as her pussy began to slosh fluid everywhere. Harry groaned as he reached his end. Suddenly, Irina was pushed off of him. She yelped as his cock left her coming pussy. She looked incredulously as Kate had gotten off the floor and took his cock into her mouth. Her throat undulated as she greedily drank down his potent, wonderful tasting seed. You bitch. Irina snarled in annoyance as Kate let go of his cock with a wet pop, low, oaking like a kid who got caught with their hand in a cookie jar. Cum was leaking out of the corner of her mouth as she looked apologetic. Tanya sat up and moaned. She grabbed Kate's head and licked remaining cum from the side of her mouth. Sorry, Kate apologized. Irina huffed and flopped back on the bed next to her male lover. She tried her best to brush the tangles out of her hair with her fingers but eventually gave up. She didn't bother hiding her perfect, nude form from any of their eyes. Tanya laid down on his other side, snuggling into him. Kate, not content with only a taste, took his cock back into her mouth and began sucking him back to full hardness. I'll need to get going soon, Harry moaned as Kate used her many hundreds of years of experience on him. Go where? Irina asked. Why would he want to go anywhere when he had 3 blonde goddesses that were willing to make all of his fantasies come true? Irina thought to herself. Back to Forks, he told her simply. Na draped her arm over his belly and held him closer. But why? She asked again, confused. Harry rolled his eyes. Because Bella's graduation is in a couple of days, and she'd be upset if I missed it. I also need to check up on Rosalie and probably spend some time with the Cullens, he explained while threading his fingers through Kate's messy, blonde hair while she bobbed her head up and down. Quote. But, Irina began but was cut off by Harry. Now girls, he lightly chastised them. Don't be greedy. Remember that I have a connection with the Cullens now. I can't imagine that will ever change, he told them. I'm glad to have you girls in my life, and I'll make sure to take care of you. But even I can't be everywhere at once, he said. Also remember that I have friends in Forks other than the Cullens. And I don't plan on abandoning them. I don't like the idea of being put on the back burner, Tanya told him, looking him in the eyes. Irina quickly agreed, nodding her head. Kate just sucked him off even harder. Maybe you girls should talk to the Cullens and try to come up with an arrangement. If not, you'll just have to share my time, he smiled without a care in the world. The 2 girls looked at each other and nodded, silently agreeing to talk with the Cullens. Kate pulled away from his cock and began giving his bloated balls a tongue bath. Immortals. Bella was nervous. Logically speaking, she knew that she shouldn't have been. She knew that Harry wouldn't let anything happen to her. Even so, having Victoria and the newborn sniffing around was putting her on edge. While she obviously cared about her safety, she also cared about the safety of others as well. Harry not so much. He was very open about the fact that he was going to let things play out the way that they were meant to. The only exceptions were about the people he cared about, like her. Of course, she made sure that his protection also applied to her father. He was also watching out for the Cullens, Rosalie in particular. Even though they didn't need his protection nearly as much as she did. When you added in the fact that he wasn't around as often, it made Bella worry a little more than normal. What are you doing? Someone shouted at a rapid pace behind her. Bella screamed and jumped off her bed, falling on the floor in the process. Edward immediately jumped into a battle stance. From the ground, she saw Harry laughing merrily at her predicament. She sent a glare in his direction and growled. Did you have to do that? Edward asked in an annoyed voice. You scared her half out of her mind. Her boyfriend pulled her to her feet and checked her for injuries. Harry eyed her over and saw that she was fine. Sometimes it's good to get the blood pumping, he explained. Not when there's a crazy vampire lady out for my blood. She reminded him, rubbing her sore bottom. Have you all decided what you want to do about her? Harry asked Edward. He nodded. We've talked it over with Sam's pack. And they agreed to help do away with the army. We'll need to lure them into a secluded space where we won't be seen, Edward told him. Victoria probably won't be there, Harry said. Edward nodded. Yes, I'm aware. She'll likely use it as a distraction to come for her. I've tried to talk him into using me as bait so that they can get rid of her once and for all, but Edward is being stubborn, she said. Turning her annoyed glare from him to her boyfriend. You know that's not a bad idea, Harry smiled, which made Edward growl. Immortals. Rosalie watched as the family around her froze in place. This probably would have freaked out any normal person, but to her, it meant the arrival of someone she loved. Harry, she happily called out. He suddenly appeared standing next to her. He laced his hand on the back of Emmett's head and pushed him forward. Rosalie watched as her husband tumbled forward like a statue that had fallen over. He hit the hardwood floor with a loud thunk. Y hopped onto the couch and took his place next to her. She couldn't help but smile. Did you have to do that? She asked him as he scooted closer. Not even waiting for an answer, she cuddled into his side. He wrapped an arm around her and kissed the top of her head when she rested it on his shoulder. Why does everyone keep asking me that? Harry wondered as he tilted Rosalie's head up and kissed her deeply. The hot blonde moaned into his mouth as she intensified the kiss. She smiled against his lips when she felt his hand touch her belly. She broke the kiss and nuzzled his cheek when his hand slid underneath her shirt and began to caress her bare skin. I'm starting to get a bump, she told him excitedly. I can tell. It probably wouldn't be noticeable to a human, but to us, he didn't need to finish his sentence. When his fingers dipped a bit lower and tucked into her jeans, Rosalie laid back and bit her lip. She even helped him by unbuttoning them for him. Feeling incredibly horny, Rosalie nipped at his jawline while his fingers crept down the front of her panties. Opening her legs a bit, she gasped when he finally touched her. Harry had never felt her so wet before. He pulled his hand out and saw his fingers absolutely soaked in her juices. He raised an eyebrow and smiled at her. Rosalie blushed and hid her face against his shoulder. Stop teasing me, she whined as Harry chucked. Suddenly, she found herself back on what she considered their island. She sighed happily when she was back in the familiar beach house. Out of habit, she began peeling off her clothes. Once nude, she squealed when Harry scooped her up bridal style and carried her to the bedroom. Being placed on the bed, Rosalie reached out and pulled him down on top of her. Her legs instantly parted, letting him settle between them while her lips attacked his. Her hand slid between the pair, grabbing his big cock and moving the tip so that it rested against her perfect slit. He lifted her arms above her head and crossed her wrists. Holding her wrists tightly together, he plunged deeply into her with a single, powerful thrust. Rosalie cried out in pleasure. She gasped and thrashed around. She found that she was unable to pull her hands apart, no matter how hard she tried. She was under his complete control, and she loved every second of it. Rosalie was unable to stop herself from tightening around his pistoning cock from his show of pure strength. You know I'm not going to let you go anywhere near that newborn army, right? He suddenly said, raising an eyebrow. Rosalie blushed deeply and came all over him right there on the spot. The end. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel for more, and don't forget to drop your review.